and there we go. I'm bringing this down. Got like close up of the mic.
Yeah,
right. Hello everyone.
Hi everybody.
Happy Saturday, Ben. How many chapters are left? What is it, like 35?
Something like that. Let's see.
I really overestimated how fast we could get through the chapters.
Well, that one chapter was really long.
That's true. Hey, Dan. Hey, Kayla. Glenn. Maddie.
Crystal. Ben.
Lucas. Hello.
Lucas, welcome back. It's been so long.
Yes, war is coming. And I believe it starts. The first chapter is like the war.
The first chapter, we are getting right into the war. Supposedly. I apologize everyone for my appearance. I am a hot, sweaty mess. Because I just got back from work and had like 10 minutes before we had to start streaming. So I am sorry.
Yeah.
That I am yucky.
That's why the stream started a little late too.
I had to...
Running behind.
Yes, I had to change my clothes. I didn't want to represent my job.
You've said it enough on here.
I know. Well, I know, but...
But hey, last time we had some good chapters.
It was kind of felt like we did a total 180.
Yeah.
Which is kind of bizarre.
We had some good times. The Marauders doing Marauder things together.
For once.
And now they're going to go to war together as the Marauders, so hopefully it all works out. We get some good times before the inevitable bad times.
Yes.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, right? No, Dan, I did not get out of the shower. I did not.
It was very hot today.
It was very hot today. Everyone was hot. I don't know how many people asked me today, are the lions going to come out?
No, they're not going to come out. Do you know how hot it is? Why are you even out?
Right?
Get out of here. Go home.
I think I saw two of them this morning at like 9:30, and then I didn't see them after that for like the rest of the day. Okay, now my glasses are clean. Love the commentary on the game. The poor furry, yes, the poor animals. It was hot today.
The game Hogwarts Legacy, that video?
Boomer laid spread eagle all day today. So hot. He was just spread eagle all day.
So did I.
I don't blame you.
On the couch.
All right, are we ready, everyone? Are we ready to do this?
Yeah, let's just get into it.
All right.
We want to read as many chapters as we can today, so.
Let's see how many we can get in the next 3 hours. Yes! Go! Yeah.
Oh, Kayla, that's awesome. You'll definitely have to let us know how that goes.
Yes, let us know. Let us know how you like Harry Potter Worlds. Yes. Let's see. Okay. Chapter 150.
Oh, yeah, the Quidditch game.
Oh,
The
yeah, the commentary. Yeah, the commentary was good, right? That was good.
That was awesome.
Chapter 151. The War. July 1978. All our times have come here, but now they're gone. Seasons don't fear the reaper, nor do the wind, the sun, or the rain. We can be like they are. Come on, baby, don't fear the reaper. Baby, take my hand, don't fear the reaper. We'll be able to fly, don't fear the reaper. Baby, I'm your man.
Bravo, very good.
I knew that song. That's why. Kind of close.
Yeah.
I flubbed it a little bit. Anyway. Sunday, 2nd of July, 1978. Hurry up, Potter! Remus hammered on the glass of the door of the phone box. Other people need to make phone calls, you know. James rather rudely turned his back, hunching his shoulders and speaking furtively into the receiver. Leave him be, Mooney, Sirius murmured, leaning heavily on the fence. He was wearing very dark sunglasses and looked paler than normal. And stop all the banging, will you? Take another pain-killing draught, Remus tutted. You're just hungover. It's your own fault for getting so smashed. I was the life and soul, I'll have you know, Sirius retorted, folding his arms as Remus came to sit beside him. The Potters had hosted the end-of-school party the night before, for all Hogwarts leavers and their friends. Yaz and Chris had come, even though they both had another year to go. A few members of the Order of the Phoenix were there too. No Dumbledore, but Ferox and Moody and Frank Longbottom and his pretty blonde girlfriend, now fiancée apparently. Moody had called Remus over to them a few times, only to be intercepted by Mrs. Potter. It's his school leavers party, Alistair, she hissed after the fourth time. Let him enjoy himself for 5 minutes before forming a flipping war council. She said this so sharply that they desisted. Remus was a bit shocked too. That's the closest he'd ever heard Mrs. Potter come to swearing. The rest of the party had felt just like the Gryffindor common room, while at the same time feeling nothing like the Gryffindor common room. Remus tried not to be so sad. He tried to imagine that one day he would find something else that felt as much like home as Hogwarts had. Lily, Mary and Marlene all had to leave at midnight. They'd promised their parents they'd spend the night at Lily's. Apparently their families felt that after 7 years of boarding school, enough was enough. Which brought Remus back to the present, watching James through the phone box door, talking to his girlfriend, who he'd literally said goodbye to 8 hours earlier. So unfair, him making us race down here. As if I could ever beat James hangover-free since 73 Potter, Remus grumbled. And it was unsportsmanlike. He knows I have a handicap. I thought your hip was better since you got that stuff off Mars, Sirius frowned, making his sunglasses slip down his nose. It is, Remus replied. I meant my smoking. There was a low rumble somewhere in the distance. Sirius sat up, suddenly, ripping off his glasses. Is that... Remus sighed. Sounds like it, yeah. In a few moments, the neighbour's motorbike came streaking through the village, growling all the way. Sirius gazed after it, starstruck. Once it was nothing but a shiny chrome dot in the distance, he leaned back, smiling to himself. Ah, I've missed her. It would be a she, Remus muttered, folding his arms. Potter! Sirius now got up to thump on the phone box door. Get out of there right now! He turned to Remus. Will you cheer the fuck up after you've had your phone call? Yes, Remus said petulantly, looking at his feet. It was another 5 minutes of goodbyes and speak-soons before Remus got his chance. He dialed the number eagerly and coiled the plastic cord round his fingers as he listened to it ring. Yeah? Is that how you answer the phone? Remus! Hiya! Crikey, wasn't expecting you. Did we set something up? Nope. Remus shook his head, grinning madly. I finished school. I can call whenever I like now. Brilliant! He heard some rustling on the other end of the phone and assumed Grant was making himself comfortable. Good. Sirius and James could wait a good long time. So when you coming down to see me, eh? Grant was asking now. Soon, Remus said automatically. He could apparate to Brighton in a matter of seconds, now that the thought struck him, but that would be a tough one to explain. Next week? That would hit the sweet spot between full moons, at least. Working Saturday, Grant replied. On lates at the pub, saving up for a holiday. August? Oh, well, okay, Remus said, a bit disheartened. Sorry, just been waiting for a proper summer holiday in ages, and I'm getting on a plane and everything. No, August is fine. Good. I'll remember to get some milk in. So where are you living now? At my friend James's. His parents are really nice. Not moved in with Loverboy then? He's here too, Remus explained, knowing it sounded a bit weird. We're going to start looking for something... somewhere to live soon, though. London, hopefully. He's rich then, Grant snorted. Should have guessed that. Looks well heeled, don't he? I suppose. He does. Got that good posture. Oh, let me tell you about this bloke I had round the other night, Grant said, and began a very long, almost unbelievable story about an encounter he'd had with a fisherman. A genuine, honest-to-Jesus fisherman, for fuck's sake, who'd done something very odd in Grant's bathtub before making a hasty exit in the early hours of the morning. By the end of it, Remus was hunched over in the phone box, wheezing with laughter, tears streaming down his face. What's so funny? James and Sirius were keen to know when he finally emerged. Couldn't possibly tell you, Remus replied, hiccuping. Muggle humour. Reckon we ought to see how Pete's doing? James asked as they walked back to the house. Nah, you know how he is with hangovers, Sirius replied, dark shades still firmly in place. All right, but we need to make sure not to leave him out, James said, opening the garden gate. I think he's worried about it. Yeah, Sirius yawned. Oh, Quidditch? Yeah, James grinned. Just let me change. I'll get a book then. Remus rolled his eyes, though he didn't mind really. They were going to treat the weekend as a holiday, it had been decided. Real life could start on Monday. The three boys thundered up the stairs, James slamming his bedroom door as he went in search of one of his many Quidditch kits. Sirius and Remus were a little slower. Brighton in August? Remus asked quietly, now that they were alone. Sirius's face lit up and he took off his glasses. You want me to come then? Yeah, cool. Of course, Remus nodded, reaching the top of the stairs. Hello, boys, Mrs. Potter trilled, coming out of Remus's room. He did a double take at that. He wasn't used to adults going into his bedroom uninvited, even though it really wasn't his room, only a guest room. Hello, Mrs. Potter, he replied politely, hoping to mask his unease. She was carrying a pile of his laundry, which was horribly embarrassing. At St. Edmund's, he'd been doing his own washing since he was 10. I see Sirius was so drunk he ended up at yours, Remus, Mrs. Potter laughed, folding Sirius's jeans over her arm. Honestly, dear, you should have just shoved him out. Oh, Remus felt his ears turning bright red as he gaped at her from the landing. Actually, Sirius came up the stairs after him, Remus and I prefer sharing. If that's, well, we just prefer to, okay? Mrs. Potter looked at him, then at Remus, who was still blushing but managed to splutter, Yeah? Well, if you like, she nodded slowly. I suppose the bed's big enough for two. Whatever makes you happy, dears. She patted Remus gently on the shoulder and kissed Sirius's cheek as she passed him on the way down the stairs. And that was pretty much that. Wednesday, 5th of July, 1978. They were permitted a longer holiday than expected. 2 days longer, in fact. The invitations came late Tuesday night, a note each from Dumbledore requesting their presence at a secret location known only to James's father, reachable only by portkey. The notes vanished as soon as they'd been read, simply dissolving away in their hands. They'd all been expecting something like it, but Remus was surprised how nervous he suddenly grew. He was not the only one. He and Sirius dressed for bed in silence, and as soon as they were under the covers, Sirius was clinging to him, face buried under Remus's arm. Tell me something, he mumbled thickly. Anything. I'm really scared about tomorrow, Remus whispered. It feels so real now. But I think it's normal to be scared. I think anyone would be. Sirius made a discontented sort of grunt. Remus squeezed him and tried a different tack. But do you know what scares me more? The fact that we're planning to move in together and neither of us can cook. Sirius began to laugh, and eventually they must have both fallen asleep properly. When they woke up, they were still wound round each other. Sweat had gathered where their bare skin pressed together, and Remus had wide red patches all over, until he'd showered. It was a bit of a walk to the portkey, which turned out to be a bright yellow rubber duck left in some long grass at the end of one of the fields surrounding the village. Remus didn't mind. He liked stretching his legs, now it didn't hurt so much. Can't believe we're only a few miles from London, he marvelled, looking up at the cloudless summer sky, the rolling green hillsides. Garden of England, James grinned. Fleamont solemnly held out the duck for all of them to put their hands on. You all got wands? He asked sharply, and they nodded, swallowing hard. Peter was sweating and looked faintly ill. Remus hoped he wouldn't throw up until they'd arrived wherever they were going. They all touched the duck and suddenly found themselves whirling through space and time at an incredible rate. It was worse than apparating, but better than flu powder, Remus decided. Moments later, all 5 of them landed in a very small, chintzy living room. The carpet was thick, soft pink, the sofas an ugly yellowish cream fake leather, and the wallpaper a hideous floral design with metallic streaks that caught the light. Fleamont, a tall, thin, red-haired man, entered as they were picking themselves up. Remus had only narrowly missed landing on the glass coffee table, which was adorned with a bowl of soapy-smelling potpourri. "Arthur!" James's father replied cheerfully, reaching out to shake the man's hand. "Sorry, Monty," Arthur raised a finger, "but Moody would never forgive me if I didn't follow protocol. Now, let me see. What was the nature of the last owl I sent you?" "It was a thank you card," Mr. Potter replied promptly. "Effie sent Molly a few of James's old things for Bill and Charlie." "Lovely." Arthur smiled and finally returned Mr. Potter's handshake. "Boys, you remember Arthur Weasley," Fleamont said, ushering them all forward to shake the man's hand too. "This is my boy James, Sirius, Peter Pettigrew, and Remus Lupin." "Hello there. What's this?" Arthur was looking at the duck portkey, which Remus was still clutching. A rubber duck," Remus replied, looking down at it. I see. And what's it for?" Arthur advanced on him, peering down at the yellow plastic toy with earnest curiosity. It's just a rubber duck," Remus shrugged. "Do you want it?" He held it out. Arthur beamed at him, taking it. "Better not tell Molly. She thinks I'm mad already." Remus smiled politely, privately thinking that Molly must be right. "How is Molly?" Fleamont asked. "And the boys? Twins, did I hear?" "Yes, 3 months old now," Arthur replied happily. "I did wonder if we ought to stop at 5, but Molly's keen to try for a girl. Poor thing's rather outnumbered as things are." As he spoke, he led them out of the hyper-feminine living room, down a narrow hall and into a tiny kitchen, which had a conservatory built on the back. Frank and Alice were in the kitchen, lining up a queue of mugs on the coffee table. "Hello," Alice smiled. "Tea?" She took everyone's orders while Frank divided up tea leaves and various teapots, and they were all told to go through the conservatory for the meeting. "Whose house is this, Dad?" James asked. "Best we don't know too much," Mr. Potter replied. "Come on, now they'll all be waiting." After the shadowy gloom of the narrow 1930s kitchen, the conservatory was blindingly bright and extremely warm. It had a clean terracotta tile floor covered with a homespun rag rug. The surrounding windows were glass and displayed an immaculately kept garden, which had a double swing set and a slide. The roof was clear perspex and spattered with old dead leaves left over from winter. There was a strong smell of fertilizer and geranium. Potted plants were darted about the place on shelves and end tables. Remus didn't notice any of these things at first because the room was packed full of people. There must have been 20 or 30 witches and wizards gathered solemnly round a large wooden table, or else standing or crammed into the wicker garden furniture in the corner. Hagrid loomed largest. Remus had never seen Hagrid anywhere but Hogwarts, which was so big that it sort of compensated for the gamekeeper's gargantuan proportions. In this hot little sunroom, he barely seemed real. There were other recognisable faces. The Pruitt twins, Mad-Eye Moody, Professor Ferox, Ted Tonks, Emmeline Vance, Dorcas Meadows. No Dumbledore, but to Remus's delight, Lily, Mary and Marlene were huddled in one corner, looking awfully young and shy in such a crowd. They greeted the boys with an eager kind of relief. Mary clung to Remus's neck very tightly. "You're here," he said, surprised. "I never was that bright," she smiled ruefully. "Remus!" Marlene reached for him. "This is Danny." A tall man stood just behind her. He had Marlene's smile, her ruddy cheeks and straw-coloured hair. "Oh, hello." Remus nodded, suddenly very shy himself. Sirius took a sideways step closer so that they were shoulder to shoulder. "Hi," Danny said, grinning. He had a fresh scar creeping up from under the collar of his robes, but nothing on his face. Not yet. He extended a hand for Remus to shake. "I've been looking forward to meeting you. I owe you such a... Danny McKinnon! James suddenly burst out. Having finally greeted Lily sufficiently, he'd only just caught sight of this awkward meeting. He strode forward. Can I just say that you are absolutely, without a doubt, the best beater the Cannons have ever had? Danny laughed amiably. Thanks. Oh, I hear you're a bloody good chaser. Is it James Potter? Yes, and I'd love to... Hate to break up the social club, gents, Moody barked, but we've got some business to get down to. That shut everyone up, and they gathered round the table looking very serious. They began with a few introductions. Through one way or another, most people knew each other. When Sirius's name was spoken, there was a bit of a hushed murmuring, but he just stared defiantly back at all of them. Remus was proud of him. Let them all see you could never judge a book by its cover, or a man by his name. After that, someone read minutes from the last meeting. Remus didn't understand any of it. They all seemed to be in a strange, grown-up sort of code, and no one stopped to explain things like they did at school. Lots of names were mentioned, people in various corners of the country who were on their side, or who had gone over to the other side. Various policies were being pushed through the Wizengamot, ways to influence votes, how to convince people to come round to the Order's way of thinking. Remus dared glance over at Sirius, James and Peter, and was relieved to see they were just as puzzled as he was. Then the list of missing was read, and everyone followed that all right. Alice proposed a minute's silence, which they all observed. There were some more updates. Everyone wanted to know what Dumbledore was up to, what progress he'd made. Progress with what exactly, Remus had no clue. Assignments were also handed out. Frank and Alice needed to be in Angsley every night, next week at 6 p.m. exactly. A man called Shacklebolt had to meet our mutual friend, you-know-where, on Friday. The Pruitt twins were on the rota for guarding this location or that. Everyone nodded along as Moody singled them out. Finally, Moody called an end to the discussion. "Those of you who have to go, go," he said gruffly. "I'll send word via the usual channels for our next meeting. Anyone needs to speak to me now, you'll have to wait a bit." He clambered to his feet, hands on the table. Suddenly, the little conservatory was no longer silent and solemn, as everyone began chattering with the person next to them, furtively agreeing things, or else just catching up. Remus blinked. That was it? He frowned and looked for Mr. Potter, who was pushing his way round the room to them. "Come with me and Hagrid," he said to their group. "You two ladies, we'll get you up to speed, eh?" Remus relaxed finally. Thank God for that. It was deeply unpleasant feeling so out of the loop. He felt incredibly young and naive. "Not you, lad!" Alistair Moody had reached them too, and clapped a chapped, calloused hand on Remus's shoulder. "Ferox and I need a word. And you, McKinnon, Daniel, that is," he added to answer Marlene's startled expression. Remus's eyes widened, and he silently pleaded for Sirius for help, only for Ferox to join them all, laughing. "Don't look so jumpy, Lupin. I promise we're not going to torture you." Remus laughed weakly, accepting his fate. He and Danny followed Moody and Ferox out of the conservatory back into the house, through the pokey kitchen and along the corridor, up the brown-carpeted staircase, which creaked heavily underfoot. They entered a small box room, evidently a child's bedroom. There was a small bed in the corner with a stars and spaceships pattern on the duvet. The furniture was small and painted pale blue, and there were glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. "Sit down, chaps." Ferox nodded at the little bed. Danny and Remus obeyed. Moody stood, towering over them both, his electric blue eyeball whirring in its socket. "No prizes for guessing what we want to talk about," he said. Remus said nothing because he didn't think an answer was required, but Danny did. "The werewolves." "Right," Ferox said, sitting in a small desk, leaning forward on his knees. He was as handsome as he ever had been, in Remus's opinion. Still a broad, amiable man of action. His golden blonde mane of hair was as lustrous as it was when Remus was 14, only maybe with some grey streaks now. An old, comfortable warmth bubbled in the pit of Remus's stomach, a crush he'd never even recognized at the time, which felt so innocent now. He smiled, finally feeling a bit more at ease. "I'm not sure how I can help," Danny was saying. "I never met one until that night." He shuddered slightly. But Lupin here has, Moody said, fixing both eyes on Remus. You have? Danny's eyes flickered over Remus, taking him all in with surprise. Remus knew what Danny saw, obviously. It was what everyone saw. A skinny, gawky 18-year-old with a too long neck and scrubby blonde curls and knobbly knees and so many scars. He swallowed, feeling like a stupid kid in a room full of men. Yeah, I have, he said, looking at his hands. 2 members of Greyback's pack, Livia and Castor. Greyback, Danny said in hushed awe. Bloody hell. Remus isn't new to this sort of operation, Ferox said. He sounded proud, but Remus looked up at him, beseeching, because yes, he was. He was absolutely new to all of this, spying and secret meetings and warfare. He didn't like this feeling. Everyone was expecting a lot. I just talked to them, he said. They don't hurt me because Greyback told them not to, I think. They do everything he says. They're loyal. Like an army, Ferox said, nodding as if he understood. Remus gave him a long stare. No, he said. Like a family. They're a dangerous cult, Moody said sharply. I don't care what we call it. We need to keep an eye on them. Insight. So what do you want us to do? Remus asked, straightening his back. He felt more himself. Ferox was still looking at him, but with real respect now. Yeah, what can we do? Danny asked. Moody's haggard, pitted face curved into a wicked grin. Ever heard of Nocturne Alley?
So I think that's a question for you that Dan points out. Moody with the eye, before Croucher Jr. is captured. Pretty sure that he's not supposed to based on books, not movie. When Harry falls into the pensieve, Moody has both eyes.
Yeah, he does.
He does?
I believe he does, yeah. Because I think Harry makes a point to notice that Moody hadn't yet acquired his magical eyeball.
Okay.
I'm
So a little error there.
pretty sure, yeah.
Writer's part. But I think it was also great to add in the rubber duck.
What exactly is the function of a rubber duck? That's a movieism, but
Either way.
it was a nice touch.
Yeah. It's because of Remus. Arthur is tortured by this question of existence for the rest of his life.
So much so that he feels the need to ask Harry about it later.
Exactly.
Um,
Constant vigilance.
Constant vigilance. Yeah.
I feel like this was a setup chapter.
It's just a setup. I don't really feel one way or the other about it. Yeah.
Or was it? I think, Lucas says, I can already see Danny on a mission with Remus dying. And, yeah.
Yeah, me too. Or Danny on a mission with Remus, and for some reason, maybe he's gay too, and Remus starts, like, thinking he's cute and gets conflicted about Sirius or something.
Yeah, that's too much. That's way too much.
The last 20 chapters were too much.
Yeah. I don't think so, though.
Yeah, I could see him kicking the bucket.
Yeah.
Lots of introductions. Oh, Corey, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Gotta remind everyone who's in the Order of the Phoenix. Everyone in the Order of the Phoenix is here.
I liked the little mention of Molly and the Potters, and we've got the Pruitt twins, Molly's siblings. Like, some of that stuff was good.
And Fred and George were just born.
Fred and George are just born.
The Marauders' successors.
That's not right, though.
Oh boy, timeline's messed up again.
Where the frick is Percy?
Well, he was already born, right?
No, all they talked about were Bill and Charlie.
Oh.
Where's Percy?
We don't talk about Percy.
We don't talk about Percy. No, no, no.
It really was like a theme in like what, book 4 or 5?
Book 5.
Don't mention Percy. We don't talk about him.
I think... Well, Ron
And also...
and Harry are born in 80, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so... And Hermione...
Isn't this 73?
This is 78.
78.
So, it should be Bill, Charlie, Percy, Fred, and George. So it should... Like, Percy's missing in this story somewhere. Yeah, that's...
It's not like he played an important role in the main story or anything. Who cares?
No. I also feel like... What year is this? 78? Yeah, that doesn't make sense because the twins are a year older than Ron, not 2 years older than Ron. They're a year ahead of Ron.
A year and a half.
Yeah, but they're only a year ahead of Harry. Yes. What? 1970. Oh, it is right? 1978?
Maybe they were held back. Or maybe, like I said, it was just like Ron's a year and a half older or something.
Could be. But either way, Percy needs to be in the story. That's not canonically correct. Oh my god.
Yeah, they did miss that. Well, no. Said wanted to stop at 5, but Molly wants to go for a girl. So Fred, George, Percy, Bill, Charlie. 5. So technically...
Percy's there. They just didn't talk about him.
They just don't talk about him.
Wow, okay. No wonder he ran away from home.
He's probably at home organizing his pacifiers or toys or something.
He could be.
In proper order. Inspecting his cauldron.
Are we ready to go next? Are we just ready to do it?
What's the next chapter called?
Infiltration.
Oh, here we go. Werewolf time.
Oh, great. My favorite. Werewolf time. It's werewolf time. It's werewolf time.
Full moon's out. This is where he dies. This is where Danny dies.
Marlene.
Did Lucas predict it so soon?
I feel like if it doesn't happen soon, I feel like Lucas probably will predict it. Ugh, werewolf time. Alright, let's just... I am just not
50,
feeling...
50-50.
Okay, let's just read it. I'm not going to rant about how much I think it's going to suck. Chapter 152. The War. Infiltration. There's a big tone shift. A war is on, after all. Some unpleasant stuff. FYI.
We went through 20 chapters of unpleasant. It's okay.
Whatever happened to all the heroes, all the Shakespeareos? They watch their Rome burn. Whatever happened to all the heroes? Whatever happened to all the heroes? No more heroes anymore. No more heroes anymore.
Beautiful. Don't know the song, though.
Nope, me either. Monday, 17th of July, 1978. Remus travelled to Diagon Alley alone for the first time via Muggle transport. Well, he actually apparated a lot of the way, but caught the tube 2 stops just to make it look convincing. Moody had forbidden him from using the Potter's Flue connection in case he was followed, and Remus agreed. He entered the alley via the brick wall by the leaky cauldron and headed straight for the pub. Danny was inside, waiting for him, nursing a tumbler of fire whiskey. He smiled sheepishly at Remus. Needed some Dutch courage. Know the feeling, Remus nodded grimly. He ordered the same from the hunchbacked innkeeper. They moved away from the bar and found a quiet corner. Remus cast Muffliato for good measure. They exchanged pleasantries briefly. Marlene had begun training at St. Mungo's and was enjoying it. Danny wasn't doing much of anything. I've got savings, obviously. I'm not exactly hard up, he sighed. The cannon's paid pretty well. I could retire if I wanted. Just didn't expect to this early. Remus didn't know what to say because the idea of having a job at all seemed too distant for him. The older man kept stealing glances at Remus's scars, too. Sorry, he said when he was caught staring. I just, never seen. I know, Remus replied, trying to relax a bit. He swallowed the last of his whiskey and pulled out his cigarette case. It's fine. Do you have... Only one or two, Danny replied. Suppose I'll get more. Oh, in the bite, obviously. His eyes darted round as he said this in case anyone was listening in. Of course, Remus nodded, lighting his cigarette and inhaling desperately. Do you know who did it? What's it matter? It might, Remus shrugged. I think it's important to them, anyway. I think the one who turns you, they have a connection to you afterwards. You might recognize their scent. They might recognize yours. Danny wrinkled up his nose in disgust. How'd you learn all this stuff? Some of it's just experience. Some of it from books. Have you read anything? Nah, Danny looked away. Never been one for reading. At St. Mungo's they said not to bother anyway. Not like there's a cure. No, Remus frowned, somehow bothered by this line of reasoning. No, there's not a cure, but there are still things to learn. It's not just a disease, It's who we are. It's not who I am, Danny said fiercely, his fist clenched on the table. Remus looked away, too, embarrassed. Danny wasn't ready for this, he realized. He was still in denial. Danny raised an arm, signaling for Tom at the bar for another drink. Remus wondered how many he'd already had. It seemed rude to ask. Danny was older than him, had been in the order longer. So, Danny said, businesslike, what's the plan? Go in, ask questions? No, I don't think so, Remus said carefully. God, Danny definitely wasn't ready. I think we need to be more, subtle. We want them to know who we are. They'll know who we are the second we walk in. The scent. Ugh. Danny wrinkled his nose again and downed his drink. Look, why don't you just stay here? Remus tried. Honestly, I've done this sort of thing before. I'll be fine. I can send you a signal if I get in trouble. Danny shook his head. Promise Ferox and Moody I'd do it. They won't know. I won't tell them, Remus pressed. Really, it's fine. If you're not comfortable, they shouldn't make you... I said I can do it. Danny slammed his fist down on the tabletop. Remus had a strange desire to start growling. It would be so much easier to settle this as wolves. He could just assert himself as the leader, and Danny would have to submit or get a cuff round the ear. He settled for just meeting Danny's eye and holding it sternly. It had the desired effect. Sorry, the Quidditch player said, sighing, tense shoulders now sloping down warily. I'm just wound up, with the moon coming on Thursday. I understand, Remus said evenly, but you've got to keep it together in there, okay? Yeah, okay. Danny nodded. He paused, giving Remus an appraising look. Miles said you were the cleverest kid in her year. Remus felt his ears turn red. Hardly, he said. She trusts you, though. I think I better too. Danny had submitted. Remus straightened his back, a flush of animal pride running through him. Thank you, he nodded. Okay, so they'll know us when we go in. The scent. I know you don't like it, but I swear it's one of the most useful skills you have now, so don't ignore it, all right? It's confusing, though, Danny said, sounding frustrated. Half the time I don't know what it is I can smell. What about me? Remus asked. Could you identify me? Danny looked at him quietly, concentrating. His nostrils twitched slightly. He nodded. Good, Remus said, a bit excited now. He'd never had anyone else to talk to about this before. It's like something familiar, isn't it? Something you know really well. You'll get better at distinguishing different scents as long as you stop trying to ignore it. I find that if I relax, it's much easier. Hardly any work at all, really. It just comes naturally after a while. Then he remembered something else that Danny ought to know, though he wasn't sure how to phrase it. You might notice that, females smell different, too. More attractive. Right, Danny nodded again, paling a bit. Remus looked down, cleared his throat, and resumed. And the ones I've met, the ones in Greyback's pack, they're strong. They have really powerful magic. They don't even need wands all the time, so it's best not to make a move, because it won't be like dueling. They're hard to predict. Merlin, Danny breathed. Don't worry, Remus said briskly. They won't try to fight us. I don't think they will, anyway. It wouldn't make any sense. They want to recruit us. Danny snorted derisively. Fat chance. Try to be understanding, though, Remus said. Listen to them. We want them to think we're interested, right? Right, of course. Except we're not. Danny was looking at him oddly again. Obviously not, Remus snapped. But we're still there to make friends. We're there to talk, which means first we have to listen. That's not the impression I had from Moody, Danny said. This is reconnaissance, not a peace mission. Well, Moody doesn't know anything about it, Remus said. Danny, listen to me. Stop thinking they're your enemies, because they're not. The one who bit you, he was strong, okay? He ought to be arrested. He ought to be punished. But someone bit him once. And because of that, his whole life changed, and no one looked at him like he was the same person anymore. You understand that, don't you? Danny was staring at the bottom of his empty glass. He didn't answer, but Remus knew he was paying attention. They're like us, Remus said firmly. Except they've not been lucky. You and me, we have people who care about us, wanted to keep us safe. Who know we're more than just monsters. The ones we're about to meet, maybe they never had that. Maybe Greyback was the first person who cared. Person, Danny spat. How can you talk like that? How can you give a toss about what happens to them? How can you be so calm? I've been angry for long enough, Remus replied coolly. Now I'm ready to do something about it. They ordered one more drink, and then they left. Danny said he'd never been to Nocturne Alley before, and, of course, Remus only knew it by sight and scent. The odour of dark magic was still there, acrid smoke, sour milk. It was a dim cobbled street with crooked lanes winding off in different directions. The shop windows were dingy and displayed diabolical assortment of dark and dangerous artefacts. The pub was easy to find. The manticore's head had a horrible swinging sign hanging on a bracket outside, which bore the image of a manticore's severed head on a platter. The creature had the head of a man, but a thick lion's mane. Its eyes rolled upward, and its mouth gaped in a silent moan of misery. It made Remus shudder. It looked like Ferox. He went in first, Danny more than happy to follow the lead. He pushed the door open, and the moment he crossed the threshold, he caught the scent. It hit him like a wall, igniting him, making every hair stand deliciously on end. 5 werewolves. He knew each one before he laid eyes on them. 3 gathered round a table in the far corner. 2 at the bar. There were others there, too. Creatures Remus had heard of but never seen. A vampire. 2 banshees. A whole gang of goblins. Danny was tense behind him. Remus willed him to calm down. It was obvious. But there was nothing they could do but go in. Remus heard the door bang shut behind them. It was fairly dark inside, the windows covered with threadbare velvet curtains. The mahogany wall panelling and countertops were grimy, covered in a strange sticky dust that glistened in places like glitter. Behind the bar were enormous mirrors covered with shelves and shelves of bottles, each one a different size, shape and colour, glowing in the firelight like a wall of jewels. The fire roared, but it was strangely cool. Remus approached the bar as casually as he could manage. The figure standing behind it was heavily robed, hood pulled low so Remus couldn't see its face. 2 fire whiskies, please, he said, instantly regretting the politeness. He'd spent too much time at the Bloody Potter's. The bartender turned round and reached for a bottle. Remus fumbled in his robes for change. Danny joined him, standing close, looking around himself furtively. The two werewolves at the bar were watching them both. That was to be expected, of course. That was what they wanted. All a part of Moody's plan. Remus and Danny were invaluable to the Order, he said. A boy who'd been turned by Greyback himself, who Greyback was interested in, and a man who'd recently been turned, who the others would see as vulnerable. Remus nodded at them carefully. Danny didn't move a muscle, but that was okay. It was clear that Remus was the leader. The other two nodded in return. Remus sensed curiosity, but not danger. He straightened up, more confident. They were male, both roughly the same height, only an inch or so shorter than Remus. One was stocky, with dirty blonde hair, a square jaw, fairly handsome under any other circumstances. The other was one of Greyback's. His hair was shaved close to his skull. He had a thick scar on one cheek and a course of tattoos covering his arms and throat, spiraling moon phases. Glancing over these two men's shoulders, Remus tried to get a read of the other three in the room. Two of them were female, one male, all Greybacks. No Livia or Castor, which was a relief. The whiskies arrived and Remus knocked his back, maintaining eye contact with the two werewolves at the bar, or at least the one who belonged to Greyback. Danny followed suit. Greyback's man inclined his head slightly, considering, and then extended a hand. He had long, thick fingernails, black with filth. Remus shook it. "Welcome, brothers," the man said, shaking Danny's hand too. Danny was visibly horrified by this, but Remus thought it probably just came across as nerves, and who could blame him? "I am Gaius. Come and sit with us." Remus glanced back at Danny, who nodded, and they both followed Gaius over to the table in the corner. The seats looked like ancient church pews, and they were just as uncomfortable to sit on. Remus tried to subtly maneuver himself beside Danny, but Gaius slipped between them, splitting them up. There was nothing to be done. Remus just hoped that Danny knew when to apparate. The scent of them all gathered together was overwhelming and exciting. Remus felt alert, full of energy, but also safe, almost comfortable. It was no wonder werewolves were so easy to recruit, he thought. People spent their whole lives in search of a feeling like this. It was a feeling he knew well. He'd had it ever since the Marauders became animagi. Pack. Family. Home. "Brothers, sisters," Gaius was saying, "this is Jeremy." He gestured at the fair-haired, handsome man he'd been talking to at the bar. "And these two are—" "Daniel," Danny said stiffly. He drank from his glass, eyes darting round. He kept looking at the women, and Remus knew why. Gaius nodded agreeably, then looked at Remus expectantly. "Remus Lupin," he replied steadily. The atmosphere shifted. The two women leaned in closer, eyes glittering, teeth bared in what might have passed for a smile. "Remus Lupin," Gaius said. "The cub who attacked our brother Castor and our sister Livia." "I defended myself," Remus said, raising his chin. Any sign of weakness would be exploited. "We are under the impression that Remus Lupin has made his choice." Oh, didn't read that right. "We were under the impression that Remus Lupin had made his choice," one of the women said, her voice low and rasping. "I wanted to complete my studies. I've finished school now," Remus said reasonably. "I'm exploring my options." The two women continued to glare at him, clearly not believing a word he'd said, but Gaius raised his hand. "Our father is forgiving and generous," he said, smiling. "He welcomes all his children." "Brother," one of the women said, "he is not to be trusted. He is Dumbledore's lapdog." "He was elevated by Greyback himself," Gaius snapped sharply, turning his head and twitching his left hand, turning the wrist. The woman who'd spoken up went rigid suddenly, eyes wide, as if she was gripped by some enormous pain. "So hold your tongue," Gaius said, turning his wrist again. The woman relaxed, breathing hard. They could all hear her heart thumping. Remus felt sick. Gaius smiled round the table. "Brothers," he said to the three new recruits, Our father, Fenrir Greyback, welcomes you into his pack. We've been shut out like you. We've been denied shelter, friendship, protection. Our father would return these things to you, and much more. How? Remus asked, hoping his voice sounded pleasant and inquisitive. Gaius gave him a look. Remus returned it. It was strange. He knew that the thing to do, the correct thing to do for the mission, for his safety, and for the other werewolves, was to lower his head, to look subservient, stay quiet. He had to get them to trust him. But he couldn't do it. Maybe it was nerves or the strength of their scent and their power so close to him, or maybe it was just that old Lyle Lupin belligerence, but Remus found himself doing exactly the opposite. He held his head higher, taking advantage of how much taller he was than the others, even seated. He made clear eye contact and said, I just wanted to know how Greyback plans to provide us with shelter, friendship, and protection. You will see, in time. Well, right, that's really not very convincing, Remus shrugged. Sounds like a lot of promises, but not much of a plan. What do you think? He looked at Danny and Jeremy, the blonde man. Danny just stared at Remus, looking appalled. Jeremy, unaware of what was going on, shrugged. I don't care how he does it, as long as he does. I've got nowhere else to go. My folks kicked me out. What if you did have somewhere to go, though? Remus said quickly. What if there was a safe place, and you didn't have to pick any sides in a war? Remus Lupin, you are confused, Gaius said, raising his voice. No such place exists for us. The humans have made it perfectly clear. The humans? Remus said, thinking fast. They're in the wrong, I agree with you. The Ministry of Magic needs reforming, but change can only happen if... They are not interested. They are only concerned with murdering our brothers and sisters, locking us up, suppressing the wolf. And what exactly is Greyback going to do about that? Remus persisted. He knew why Danny's pulse was racing, why he kept raising his eyebrows at Remus desperately over Gaius's shoulder, but Remus couldn't think about that now. It sounded like madness pushing Gaius like this when he was clearly giving off danger signs, but it was almost as if Remus couldn't stop himself. When you meet my father, Gaius growled, you will understand. I'd like to meet him, Remus said keenly. Gaius's lips curled. There will be time for that, when you've proved yourselves. He looked at the others. When you have all proved yourselves, you will earn the right to call him father. And how do we do that? Remus asked, leaning forward, keen to keep Gaius's attention on him. He knew Danny would never join the werewolves, but this Jeremy kid, he was in real danger. Gaius's whole posture had changed. He seemed larger, his shoulders broader. He frowned at Remus. 3 full moons spent with the pack, he said, his eyes blazing with intensity. Great, Remus nodded. Yeah, okay, I'd love to meet him. Can we do that? Can you tell me where... Pain shot through him, excruciating, burning. His bones were melting, his skin was bubbling. He wanted to cry out, but his jaw locked. Gaius's eyes bore into Remus's, furious, and suddenly Remus could hear him, hear Gaius's voice inside his head. Remus Lupin, you are a fool, it purred. My father wishes you to live, but only you. You will be obedient, or I will kill everyone in this room. I will kill... Remus felt a strange sifting feeling in his mind, and knew what Gaius was doing. He tried to resist, but the pain was such a distraction he didn't have the strength. Gaius alighted on something he'd found. His eyes lit up maliciously. I will kill James and Potter and Lily Evans, and Peter, and Marlene and Mary, and I will kill Sirius Black. A surge of fury rose up in Remus, and it was enough, only just enough, only barely, to break away Gaius's firm grip on his mind and body. He roared, lashing out with arms and legs because his thoughts were too muddled to do anything else. Shaking his head as if to rid himself of Gaius's wicked voice, he lunged at the other werewolf, forcing him back against the pew, half on top of him, wrapping hands round his throat and squeezing. The other 3 werewolves, Greyback's werewolves, all tried to move, but Remus was so full of anger and violent emotion he barely needed to think, and they were locked in place. "Is this what you mean by proving myself, Gaius?" he hissed, squeezing harder so that the other man's face was turning red, veins bulging in his temples. "Have I earned your fucking respect now?" Gaius clawed at Remus desperately, but only when he was beginning to slacken and fade did Remus let go. "Danny," he said urgently, "we have to go." They had to leave first. They wouldn't be chased out. That would look like they were running away. Oh, fuck, he thought. Oh, fuck, why did I do that? What was he going to tell Ferox? Moody would have his bollocks. The last thing Remus... Ow! Ow! Ow!
What, she get you?
She literally climbed up me, yes.
Oh, ow.
The last thing Remus saw before he and Danny apparated was Jeremy's horrified face. "Merlin!" Danny yelled as soon as they were away from there. "What the fuck?" They were in a field miles and miles outside of London. They were supposed to walk from there to a bus shelter where Moody would be waiting for a debrief. "I'm sorry," Remus panted, shaking his head. I lost my temper." "I'll bloody say," Danny ranted. "Wouldn't have let you have all that fire whiskey if I knew you were going to flip your shit and try to take on Greyback's whole army single-handed." "It was not his whole army," Remus replied sourly, wiping sweat from his brow. He was still buzzing from the agony Gaius had put him through. "And that wasn't a bloody mission, was it?" Danny retorted. "Subtle, you said. Just listen to him, you said." "I realised that wasn't going to work," Remus tried to explain. "They're a pack. You have to dominate the leader. You need to show them..." "You sound like them," Danny said suddenly. "What? You! All your special skills crap. You want me to be like that, don't you? No better than a pack animal? A fucking beast?" Remus stared at him. He didn't know what to say. He was too giddy. His thoughts were a mess. "Look," he said, trembling. "Let's just find Moody." "Right," Danny agreed, still red-faced. "Sooner we do, the better. Sooner we do, sooner I could get away from you." Remus didn't reply, just started walking. His head hurt so much, a migraine building behind his eyes. The bright summer sunshine was like daggers after the gloom of the manticore's head. His mind was running a mile a minute. How would he explain this? How could anyone hear it and trust him ever again? What worried him most was that his first instinct was to lie. Danny was walking faster than him, but then he hadn't just had his mind ripped apart by a... Oh, fuck. Was Danny right? Was Remus just like them, deep down? They reached the bus shelter, long abandoned, covered in yellow pollen and sprayed on graffiti. Moody was waiting, punctual as always. He looked at them both, blue eye whirring wildly between them. "What went wrong?" he asked at once. Remus looked at Danny. Danny looked at Remus, then down at his feet. Remus swallowed and he bit the bullet. "I made a mistake," he said. "I let my temper get the better of me." Moody looked at him for a long time. He was completely inscrutable, and though Remus knew Moody wasn't actually reading his mind, he knew how that felt now. He felt as though he were being picked apart slowly at the same time. "Tell me everything, lad," Moody said finally. Remus did his best. He didn't mention the whiskies. He didn't mention the loss of control he felt, even before Gaius had hurt him. He definitely didn't repeat anything Gaius whispered into his brain. He told only the story Danny might have told. And it worked. "Sounds like you acted in self-defense," Moody said, businesslike, as if this sort of thing happened all the time. "I went too far," Remus said. It was easy to be submissive now, to be polite and deferential to someone else. I behaved badly. I put Danny in danger." "Don't be so hard on yourself, Lupin," Moody said, sounding almost kind. "You were in a tight spot. You both got out of it. Do you need to see a healer? Do you know what curse it was?" It was wordless magic. Remus shook his head. And I'm okay. It wasn't even as bad as a full moon. That was a lie. He could still feel remnants of it. His head throbbed and his nerves were vibrating. But it was going away. Pain often did, or else you just learned to get on top of it. Moody laughed gruffly. Good chap. Right, McKinnon. Anything further? Danny shook his head. He hadn't said much while Remus was explaining himself, only interjected once or twice to confirm that it was the truth. He still didn't look at Remus, and Remus didn't blame him. Moody, if he noticed, didn't comment on this odd atmosphere. He clapped his hands together. Well then, I'd say we're all right to apparate now. Lupin, I'm coming with you. Got another meeting. McKinnon, you'll be okay to get back somewhere safe? Yeah, no problem, Danny replied, hollow-voiced. See you, and began to walk away, back into the field. Remus looked at Moody. He's angry with me. He's angry with me. I don't think we should pair up again like that. You won't, Moody said briskly. Remus's heart sank. So that was it. Moody didn't trust him anymore. The aura began to walk in the opposite direction from Danny, across the quiet country road. Remus hurried to keep up. The ground felt weird below his feet, like a sponge. Moody stopped abruptly, having apparently judged the shady copse of trees they were now standing in as a suitable place to apparate from. He glanced at Remus. McKinnon can't handle it. That much is clear. We'll have him on communications or guarding a safe house. You'll be prepared to go it alone next time? What? You showed them who you are today, Moody said, both of his eyes focused on Remus. That's good. We'll get back to the pack. That'll get back to the pack. Stir 'em up. We want Greyback distracted. I'm not sure I understand, Remus frowned. Don't you? Moody raised a bushy eyebrow. I think you're more canny than you let on, Lupin. Right, come on. I've got an appointment with Fleamont. That was that. No more questions. In a matter of seconds, they were back on the Potter's back doorstep, answering the identifying questions from Euphemia, and then everything was normal. They were back in reality, surrounded by the gentle, warm familiarity of the kitchen. It was like being jolted from a nightmare, and you just had to keep reminding yourself that everything was okay now. Moody disappeared off toward the Potter's study, and James and Sirius came running through the hallway to meet Remus. Sirius looked half mad, and they stood in front of each other for a moment, wide eyes full of words. Finally, Sirius came toward him, enveloping Remus in a hug and burying his face in his neck. You're okay, he whispered. I'm okay, Remus said, fiercely squeezing him back tightly. And he wanted to say it. Oh God, he really wanted to. But he had no energy left, so he just kissed him, and James was right there, and so was Mrs. Potter. But it was the only thing that Remus knew that could tell Sirius what he needed to tell him. He put the rage away, the terror, the guilt, and the fierce need for revenge. There would be a time for it, but not yet.
So Remus finally goes at it with someone else, instead of going in on his own. And then Moody tells him, now you're going to go and mind your own next time.
Yeah.
So maybe it wasn't a bad idea to go. Well, I guess second time. First time he technically did go with Peter. Peter didn't have a choice in the matter.
No.
But what?
I just don't know how I feel about the concept of the heightened magic and the wandless, wordless magic that they're able to do just because they're werewolves.
Did they say it was close to the full moon?
Yeah.
Well, that's why. Because that I can understand.
Yeah, but
You have, like, wizard magic, and then on top of that, werewolf magic all flowing through.
well, we have no evidence of werewolf magic. This is all concocted into the story, right?
Well, yeah. I'm just saying it makes sense in the story.
I know it makes sense. I'm just saying I'm not into it, I guess. I don't know.
Oh.
He finally directed his anger at the right people. Yep.
That's true.
That's true.
Instead of going back and yelling at Sirius.
That's correct.
So good for him. He's growing as a person, finally. And someone said something. Oh yeah, so it was Remus's fault that Voldy made his first of 4 attacks against James and Lily. I'm pretty sure that's what it's alluding to in this story.
Oh my god.
But I mean, don't you think if you were Remus, you would tell Moody that he read your mind?
I would think that would be straight up, well, yo, this dude used legitimacy on me. I would tell somebody that.
Mm-hmm. It's number 1. Now you know that he's capable of doing that. Number 2, you're gonna have to protect the people who...
May have to fight that guy.
Yeah. And he might have just read a bunch of the Order of the Phoenix's plans in Remus's mind. Whatever he knows about it.
That's wishful thinking, Biggs. We know Harry is the only one to make Remus grow up.
Yeah, that's true. Fair enough.
He did put Danny in danger, too. Like, he really did.
Yeah.
Like... And now Danny is, like, so horrified by this experience.
Mm-hmm.
And Dan did make a point. Not a good time to leave him alone.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
This is like Tom and Harry telling Dumbledore that they have nothing more to tell him.
I also agree.
Yeah, it kind of does feel like that, doesn't it? When Dumbledore is like, do you have anything else you want to tell me, Harry? And Harry is like, nope.
Yeah, that's true. Except Remus is a lot older than Harry was there.
That's true.
But I agree with Kayla. I thought this was an okay chapter. I didn't think it was that bad.
I just am not
honestly,
feeling the werewolf thing.
I almost expected like a Inglorious Bastards bar scene to break out here.
That would have been
like,
cool.
Remus jumped him. Thought it was just gonna be like a magical bloodbath.
Yeah, I know. Remus loves his secrets. I know. I don't know. I just feel like the werewolf magic descriptions and all of that stuff. I don't know if I'm not into it.
I don't mind it. I mean, I've said before, I think, it's not necessary for the story, but at the same time, I don't think it doesn't feel like it's shoehorned in.
No, I don't know. Like, I'm reading the chapter and Danny going, oh, you sound just like one of them. Oh, ugh.
Yeah, I feel like Danny's whole, 180 from being thankful to Remus to this hatred-filled person, I don't think it was a smooth transition.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I actually thought it made a lot of sense because he's trying to figure out who he is.
Oh, yeah.
And Remus is like, this is who we are, this is what we're about, and this, and this, and Danny is still trying to understand it.
Yeah.
And Remus is, trying to shove it down his throat that, you can do this, it's good, it's gonna be fine, blah, blah, blah.
But Danny is still, he's full of all the prejudices that he's known
his
about
whole
werewolves.
life. Yeah.
I mean, you saw how Marlene reacted when she first found out.
Right.
Even though Remus was just trying to help.
Yeah. I don't know. It would have been great to read a lot when he's in wolf form and the boys in animagus form, but they just brush over it. That's what Maddie said.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, that all... Yeah. Going back to those, 20 chapters of kind of stale content... That could have been the stuff they could have added in there that would have made things more interesting.
I'm not saying I hated it, this last chapter. I'm just saying, I'm having a hard time caring about it, I guess.
I thought it was okay. I just wish they would maybe stick with one werewolf from Greyback's clan so we can kind of get to know him more. He's met werewolves 3 times now, and each time it's a different werewolf.
Yeah.
Let's just keep it consistent, and so we can kind of know who we're getting in with, and we can slowly, learn more about.
Yeah.
I think that would be interesting.
I also I'm having a hard time buying the wordless, wandless magic. Because it's so hard to do.
It is, but when you think about, like, Harry or young wizard children, like random things happen when they're not trying to do it because they don't know how to control it. Well, I mean, with werewolves, it's a totally different type of magic, and maybe they find it hard to control, and especially when it's near the full moon and, like, the magic is very strong, it's hard to control, and it just kind of comes out as, magic would from a child.
But this reads almost like it's a superpower.
Well, yeah, but that's around the full moon, his magic is, like, increased.
Yeah,
it's been like a main theme.
I'm saying I don't like the mechanics of that.
Like, I don't mind it. I think it makes sense because you have werewolf magic along with wizard magic.
Yeah, but werewolf magic isn't like house elf magic.
And why do you turn into the werewolf at the full moon? It's probably because the full moon increases whatever the magic hold is the werewolf has on you and allows it to overcome the wizard and, like, come out.
Yeah, but you just turn into a wolf.
Yeah. But
Ren says, what does Fantastic Beasts say about werewolves? I'd have to get the book out because I don't remember. I'd have to grab it. It's out here somewhere, is it?
Where is it?
Oh, no, I don't think I put them out. I don't think I put those out.
I could have sworn they're out.
Beetle the Bard is out.
Where's Beetle the Bard?
Right there, next to the Macedonian Harry Potter.
Oh,
it's Russian Beetle the Bard, that's why.
It was out here. I guess you put it away or something.
I must have moved them.
Yeah. Anyways.
Oh, no, they're right there.
Oh, alright.
I knew they were out here. I've only been listening to your reading of Game of Thrones. The writing is so much more captivating there. I understand why this remains a fan fiction.
Yeah.
It's all alphabetical.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was looking for a table of contents, but that
Yeah.
moves things along.
I think it's just a personal opinion. I'm just not enjoying the mechanics of the werewolf thing. The scent thing is getting kind of cringy to me. I don't know. The whole smell thing is just... Go ahead.
Classification 5X. Werewolf. The werewolf is found worldwide, though it is believed to have originated in Northern Europe. Humans turn into werewolves only when bitten. There is no known cure, though recent developments in potion making have to a great extent alleviated the worst symptoms. Once a month at the full moon, the otherwise sane and normal wizard or muggle afflicted transforms into a murderous beast. Almost uniquely among fantastic creatures, the werewolf actively seeks humans in preference to any other kind of prey. That's it.
Yeah.
I didn't realize muggles turn into werewolves. I thought it was just wizards. I thought muggles just died.
Most of the time they do, but
okay.
Sometimes it depends on the muggle. I don't know. I think it's just that it gives them this, like, almost superhero or superpower kind of quality that I'm not jiving with.
I'm okay with it. I can understand it. I think it would make sense.
Well, okay then. We will just have to agree to disagree.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know.
I think part of it is, like, you think of the werewolf has magic, the wizard has magic. Normally, the werewolf's magic is lesser than that of the wizard, so it's able to suppress the wolf. But as it gets closer to the moon, that balance shifts. So you have this clash of energies. And hence, like, crazy things happen and wordless magic can happen, like with children.
I just don't buy it. I don't buy wordless, wandless magic. I don't buy that. According to the mechanics of the universe, I don't buy it.
I'm okay with it. Because we know wandless magic is a thing. Wordless magic is a thing.
Right, and how hard is it for them to do wordless magic? And there are...
We don't know.
Harry tries to do it. It's very hard. The whole class tries to do it in 6th year, and they struggle with it.
Yeah, but that's 6th year. But again, Harry made the glass disappear without saying a word.
That's different, though. That's not training and harnessing your magic. That's an accident.
Yeah, he's not trying to do that with the...
Yeah, but these characters are actively doing wordless, wandless magic.
Yeah, but Remus wasn't. But that werewolf, who knows? He could have studied that. He could have practiced for how long? Until he figured out how to harness it.
I also
he's
think...
like fully accepted the wolf, so he's like fully invested in finding what the extent of his powers are.
You know, the whole thing with Greyback's pack is that they reject wizards and all of that.
Yeah.
But yet they want to learn to use magic and all this stuff. I don't know.
But maybe they're not using wizard magic. They're using the magic that is presented by the werewolf. And that's why it's so much more powerful. And that's why the rules that you normally would have with wordless is different.
I also just, the whole thing about the wolf being like an inner entity almost, whereas in the mechanics, it's very much like an illness with symptoms.
Yeah.
Not a superpower.
I never said it was.
No, that's what I'm saying. This is my conflict with it, is that you canonically it's seen as an illness. And it is, to a degree, it's an illness, and this is turning it into almost like I've got superpowers kind of thing.
Well, I think it's because we're seeing it from Remus's perspective, because it kind of is, you know. We see McKinnon there, like, shooting all this stuff down and hating it, but Remus is telling him, like, no, embrace the symptoms, the increased smell and all this other stuff, because it's useful. That's why I'm saying, I think, like, the werewolf has embraced his werewolf side as much as he can and has used that to...
Alright, Kayla. We'll see you later. Thank you for popping in for just a little bit. Sorry.
Grow his powers in that way and find new ways to conduct magic through his werewolf side.
I just don't buy it.
I don't see an issue with it.
I
think it totally works. There's nothing that Rowling has written to the contrary, so you can kind of have free reign.
No, I agree. My opinion, I'm saying based on how lycanthropy is presented in the novels, it's not presented as an affliction that would give you all of these enhanced abilities. Or something to, you know, give you these hyper abilities.
Well, it's never really...
It doesn't...
The abilities are never really touched on. And obviously when Greyback transforms, he has some control over the wolf because he embraced it. So... maybe by embracing it, you get these abilities.
Yeah, but Greyback is not remotely any kind of exceptional wizard.
No, but he's an exceptional werewolf.
He's a horrifying werewolf.
Well, yeah, but...
I just... That's the other thing. Like
Voldemort is a horrifying wizard, but he's also exceptional.
I'm just not, I guess, buying the vibe of the superpower thing. I hope whoever is listening to this stream is understanding what I'm trying to say, if I'm making any sense. It just doesn't... Lycanthropy being something that would give you superpowers just doesn't translate into what lycanthropy is supposed to be.
But I don't think it's giving them superpowers.
But that's how that's how it's treated in the novel. It's
This was the only time, though.
no, he's always talking about how he can smell this and he felt the power surging through him when he was apparating or whatever it else. Like the crackle of the magic in the air and all that. And I don't know.
Well, move on. We've spent too much time on this.
I think Greyback is given a wand at some point. Doesn't mean he's a great wizard.
Well, no. We never hear about him doing any wizardly things.
I sort of feel like spectacular powers of the werewolf would have at least been mentioned in the canon. I think this is something that the author is totally just making up for the story.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, in the canon, nothing was said to the contrary. So they kind of have, like, freedom in that area to go.
I'm not saying this person has to stick to the canon. I'm just saying that I just don't know if I'm feeling it. That's all.
Okay.
Like, I wouldn't mind the whole heightened abilities thing, but sometimes when she writes it, it's cringy, and maybe that's why I'm having trouble with it.
Cringy, how so?
Like, when Remus makes those statements about, like, hearing this person's heart thump or smelling this or that and the other thing, it's almost reads like an invasion of privacy sometimes. Like, ugh.
Well, yeah.
That's cringy to me. And it's kind of, yeah, I don't know how I feel about that. And I just don't buy that they can do wandless, wordless magic just because it's a full moon. Just not buying it. Anyway. Shall we continue?
Yeah.
Right. Here we go. Chapter 153. The War. Home Front. Late summer, 1978. He rolled over for the 100th time, the sheet sticking to his hot skin. He hadn't felt right since the full moon, maybe even since before then. He was sleeping only a few hours each night, and now it was almost 4 o'clock in the morning and he hadn't drifted off yet. Can't sleep? Sirius rolled over too. No, Remus sighed, sitting up. Sorry, I should go in the other room. Please don't, Sirius said, rubbing his eyes. It's fine. I'm up now too. I'll keep you company. I'm not really in the mood to talk. That's okay, I can talk. I'm always in the mood to talk. Remus smiled, though he didn't want to. Bloody black. Go on then, he murmured, lying back down. Go on then, he murmured, lying back slowly. His back hurt from the last full moon, and he'd rubbed some of Marlene's ointment on there before bed, but it was wearing off already. Sirius rolled over onto his side, stretching an arm over Remus's body and talking sleepily into his ear. I can't wait till tomorrow, he murmured. I can't wait for you to see the flat finally. I never had anywhere that was just mine before. Me neither, Remus replied, eyes closing. Sirius had bought the flat the week before, while Remus was recovering from the full moon. It had been, of course, an impulse buy, but Remus thought that was okay, really. He'd had too much on his mind to be much help, and it was Sirius's money after all. It was in London, and a Muggle neighbourhood, too. After the Potters' initial surprise at the boy's decision, Fleamont had insisted on ensuring that all of the standard security charms and alarms were in place before they were allowed to move in, so Remus hadn't seen it yet. Tell me what it's like, Remus said, turning into Sirius's body, curling up. He didn't make himself small very often. After all, he was bigger than Sirius, and it seemed silly. But just now, sleep-deprived and filled with anxiety, it felt nice to bury his face in Sirius's nightshirt. It's small, Sirius said, resting his chin on top of Remus's head. Just one bedroom, one bathroom, one kitchen. Sounds massive, Remus replied. He meant it. He'd never imagined living somewhere like that, not in a million years. We can have it however we want. Furniture, wallpaper, anything. I'll leave the interior design up to you. Fine, you can build the bookcases. Bookcases? Remus raised his head. He hadn't thought of that. Yep, bookcases, Sirius replied, a smile on his face. Space for the record collection too, obviously. And there are some garages nearby I might be able to rent. Oh, we getting a car? Remus was a bit alarmed by this. He'd only just agreed to keep James's old broom for travel on order-related business. He really didn't fancy learning to drive too. Not a car, Sirius said evasively. But I was just thinking. I mean, it might be really useful to have another means of transport. There's the tube, Remus said. Buses. London is actually sort of famous for them, you know. Yeah. Have you already bought it? Remus pulled away to see Sirius's face. Sirius! What? Sirius was grinning mischievously. It's an early birthday present to myself. Your birthday isn't for months. Housewarming, then. I'll get you something, too. Honestly, Remus laughed, wrapping his arms round Sirius again. You're a liability, spoilt brat. Get home, okay? Sirius replied, laughing, his voice muffled by Remus's shoulder. They lay still and quiet for a while, just like that. Remus relaxed a bit, but he still wasn't going to sleep. It would be light soon, surely. Every now and then he thought he could hear a bird singing in the garden. Wouldn't get that in London. Just rattling milk floats and bin lorries, and buses hissing, and maybe the odd pigeon. He couldn't wait. He held Sirius a little tighter. They'd been hugging a lot lately. Contact seemed vital. It reminded Remus he was human. Everything okay? Sirius asked quietly. Fine, just can't sleep. Still not in the mood to talk about it? No. Okay. Then he moved his head against Remus's shoulder, turning to kiss the softest part of his neck. Sirius's hand slid down Remus's hip slowly. In the mood for anything else? Remus had sort of expected to see his new flat for the first time alone with Sirius. How foolish of him. He'd forgotten that even outside of Hogwarts, Sirius and James came as a pair, and wherever James went, Peter and Lily typically went, so it ended up being the five of them catching the train into London the next morning. Sirius was buzzing with excitement, unable to sit still the whole way. He bounced about the carriage, ran down the escalators at Waterloo, and hopped from foot to foot on the underground platform. They were all in Muggle clothes, and he was wearing his leather jacket, black jeans, and combat boots. Remus liked to focus on these details, because if they were Muggles, they weren't at war today. The flat was off Leicester Square in Chinatown. It was a speedy part of town, but that didn't bother Remus, nor did it seem to concern Sirius. It was crowded and noisy, the smell of Chinese food and cigarettes and open drains permeating the air. The phone boxes were plastered with adverts or escorts, and they passed at least 2 peep show cinemas. I love London, Remus smiled to himself. Sirius flashed him a grin. They entered their building through a door in the back alley of an off-license, filing in one by one, Peter loudly remarking on how small everything seemed and how strange Muggles were. Then up a short flight of stairs where they reached a concrete landing with a bright yellow front door. Number 9. Home, Sirius said as he jammed the key into the lock, beaming at them all. It was small. It was mundane, plainly furnished. It was basic. It was absolutely perfect. They stepped directly into the living room, which was very modern, with no entrance hall. There was a doorway to the left leading through to the kitchen, which was sunny and bright, a little window over the gleaming metal sink. Lily made a beeline for the fridge. She'd very sweetly bought a bottle of sparkling white wine to celebrate with. Remus went back into the living room and down a hallway where there were 2 doors. One was the bathroom, 60s green tile with pink porcelain fittings. The other was a bedroom. 2 suitcases, the clothes they'd packed up and sent ahead, sat side by the wardrobe. The bed was already there, neatly made with a maroon blanket and throw. Not a 4-poster, no secretive dark hangings, just a perfectly normal bed for 2. Well, Sirius asked anxiously, entering the room behind him. I know it's really Mugglish, but I didn't want to go overboard on the money. It's much easier to protect It's much easier to protect. Monty even had Moody advising on some of the shield enchantments. It's great, Remus nodded. He was so happy, he just smiled, staring round. There weren't words. Luckily, Sirius was smiling too, watching him. I always know it's good when you don't have something sarcastic to say, he winked. Come on, you barely looked at the living room. Remus followed him back through. Lily was pouring out tumblers of sparkling white wine. We should have got you all proper wine glasses as a present. And they all toasted, cheering loudly. Mate, you've got to show me how that electric oven thing works, James said, wide-eyed. And the radar eater. Radiator, Lily rolled her eyes. Honestly, how did you get an acceptable in Muggle studies? Peter was looking at the small brick fireplace, which was very out of place in the contemporary living room with its cream carpet and plastic Venetian blinds. Are you on the Flu Network then? He asked. Yep, Sirius nodded. For order stuff, obviously. And you lot, Moody's made it untraceable. The whole flat is unplottable, too. Remus couldn't help feeling a bit put out by the fireplace. Even if it was essential, he didn't like the idea that members of the Order had access to their flat at any time, day or night. The thought of Alistair Moody's head appearing in their living room made him shudder. Sirius, still watching Remus's face carefully, gave him a nudge. I got something else, too. He gestured to the couch. They all turned to look. You've got a telephone! James suddenly yelled, almost spilling his drink in excitement as he pointed at the device sitting on an end table by the sofa. Calm down, Lily chastised. A phone? Remus stared at it, amazed. Is it connected? Yes, Remus said proudly. Just pick it up and dial, so I don't have to hang about outside phone boxes anymore. He was cut off because Remus had practically knocked him over, throwing his arms round Sirius, and then, because after all they were in their own home now, took his head in his hands and kissed him long and hard. Lily and James cheered again. Peter downed his drink and went to pour some more. Do I look okay? Sirius was peering at himself in the bathroom mirror. He kept buttoning and unbuttoning his shirt. Should I wear a tie? No, Remus laughed, standing behind him, pulling on a plain grey t-shirt over his damp hair. Stop fussing, you look fine. Just fine? Sorry, Remus replied deadpan. You look incredible. Thank you, Sirius smiled smugly at him through the mirror. I just don't want to let you down. I've never met anyone's mum before. What about Mrs. Potter? The Potters don't count, they're like my own parents. I don't need to impress them. You'll be standing next to me, Remus shrugged on a cardigan to cover his arms. She'll be impressed. Don't do that, Sirius tutted. I bet she thinks the sun shines out your arse. Are you ready? As I'll ever be. They left the bathroom, making their way out of the flat. They'd only been moved in for a week and a half, and there were still boxes everywhere, but it already felt like home to Remus. He loved the jangle of keys in his pocket, the sensation of closing the front door on the world, having a place to himself completely. The cramped Soho flat was nothing like as grand as Hogwarts, but already Remus liked it better than anywhere else he'd ever lived. Grant had put it best. Remus phoned him as soon as he had the chance. A fixed address, eh? Blimey, we have moved up in the world. They apparated from the landing outside, which had become a habit. It was secluded enough that no one would see them. In mere moments they found themselves on a quiet residential road in Cardiff, where it was, of course, just starting to rain. Sorry, should have warned you, Remus laughed as Sirius yelped and scrambled to yank up his shirt to protect his hair. Welsh summers aren't much better than Scottish ones. They made the short walk to the hospital quickly, and Remus led Sirius to Sparrow Ward with much more confidence than the first time he'd met Hope. He smiled and gave a little wave to the nurse on duty before walking toward the end of the ward to see his mother. The curtain was drawn halfway across, so he peered round it first to check if she was asleep. But no, she was sitting up in bed flicking through a fashion magazine. He cleared his throat and she looked up. A huge smile spread across her thin face, showing every pearly tooth. Remus! Hi, he said, ducking his head shyly and walking round to greet her. He kissed her lightly on the cheek. He'd done that 3 times now, having graduated up from her kissing his hand. Progress was slow, but every milestone felt enormous. "I was hoping you'd come today," she beamed, clutching his hand and looking him over as he folded himself into the orange plastic chair by her bed. "Sorry it's been so long," he apologized. "I finished school and then I moved. I've brought someone to meet you." He glanced up at Sirius, still standing just behind the curtain, looking at Hope nervously. "Mum?" Second time he'd ever said that to her face. "This is Sirius Black." Sirius came round and looked at the end of the bed, hands in front of him. He looked like he was trying very hard not to fidget. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Lupin," he said politely. She didn't correct him on the name, only smiled benignly at him. "Hello, Sirius. Are you a friend of Remus's from school?" "That's right," he nodded. "Sirius and I live together in London," Remus said, testing the water. He watched her face, but she was inscrutable. She could be an aura, no problem. "Doesn't that sound like fun?" she said, glassy-eyed. "Your dad used to take me for trips to London. I love to go on the double-deckers." Ah, she was in the mood to talk about Lyle. These were far from Remus's favourite visits, but he let her talk because it made her seem happy. She started on a long rambling story about all the times Lyle had taken her to London, where they'd seen all the sights, and all of the various other places he'd taken her. Edinburgh, and Blackpool, and Aberystwyth. Remus tried not to listen too hard. He didn't want to start wondering whether Lyle would have taken them both to see these places, if things had been different. Eventually, with Hope showing no sign of stopping, Remus gestured for Sirius to take a seat, and he dragged one over from the next bed, which was empty. As he settled in, Remus noticed the suitcase at the foot of the bed. It wasn't usually there. Was she finally allowed to go home? "And I had my first ever curry in a little restaurant in Wembley," she was saying now. "We're in Chinatown," Remus said. "Lovely." She smiled, though she clearly had no idea where that was. She was growing increasingly childlike, he thought. Must be the medication they had her on. It ought to have been annoying, but it actually helped him empathise with her. "And you'll have your exams results soon, will ya?" "We've had them," Remus replied. "I've passed everything." "He came top in the school in 3 subjects," Sirius said out of the blue. "History, care of magical creatures, and arithmancy, and top marks in everything else." Remus blushed. That wasn't strictly true. Okay, he'd earned outstanding in most subjects, but he'd only gotten exceeds expectations in Transfiguration. "That's my clever boy," she grinned dozily. "Just like his dad." "Are you going somewhere, Mum?" Remus asked, still bothered by the suitcase. "Oh, yes," she nodded, resting her head back against the pile of pillows propping her up. "Yes, I'm off to the hospice tomorrow." Remus's insides turned cold. His throat went dry. No, he thought. I need more time. "Tomorrow?" he choked. She squeezed his hands again, her eyes sharpening. "I'm ready, love. It's time." "But—" He didn't know what to say. He thought he might cry, but he didn't want to upset her. Sirius looked confused. He didn't know what that meant. "I'm making sure everything's in order," Hope said matter-of-factly, sounding much more mature than usual. "If you leave me your address, I'll make sure everything ends up where it ought to. And, of course, the funeral. I've told Gethin you'll to be notified as soon as possible, and that you're sat at the front. Don't let them put you at the back like some poor relation. You're my son, and I've no shame at all. Understand?" "Mum, please." Remus looked away, shocked by how distraught he felt. "I'm not yet, okay?" Her face softened. She sighed. "All right, my darling. I'm sorry." Who the fuck is Gethin? He wanted to shout. How many surprises are waiting for me after you're gone? He'd known this was coming, but it was still the worst news of his life. He couldn't shake the sense of betrayal. They'd only just found each other. Sirius grew uncomfortable in the silence that followed. He didn't understand Hope and Remus's shared inability to say the important things. Sirius could never see why anyone didn't just say what they felt as soon as they felt it. but he respected their privacy and got up. "I'm going to get a cup of tea, Remus," he said gently. "Would you like one?" Remus nodded. "Canteen's down the hall," he said, staring at the floor, still holding Hope's hand. "I'll meet you there in a minute." "Can I get you anything, Miss Lupin?" She shook her head. "No, thank you, dear. It was lovely to meet ya." He inclined his head gallantly, smiling, politely. God, he could be charming in even the most desperate situations. Then quickly left. Remus let go of Hope's hand and buried his face in his palms. Fuck. Couldn't he just enjoy something for 5 minutes without a tragedy? "He's a very nice young man," Hope said brightly. "Yeah," Remus replied, huffing a joyless laugh, rubbing the back of his head nervously. "I can see why you like him," she prompted. She wanted the unpleasantness over, clearly. Perhaps she wanted to go back to talking about Lyle. Well, he wasn't going to let her. She wasn't the only one who could drop bombshells. He looked at her, trying to meet her eye. "Look, there's something I really feel like I ought to explain. About Sirius and me." Hope closed her eyes and with a smile gently shook her head. "It's all right, Carried." She took his hand and patted. "I knew the moment I saw the two of you." "You? Really?" Remus stared at her. He'd never talked about this with anyone older than himself before. "I've had a feeling for a while. I don't pretend it makes no difference at all," she replied, choosing her words carefully. "But it doesn't change who you are, my darling boy." She reached for his hand again and he held it. She stroked his knuckles softly with her thumb. "You love him, don't you?" Remus felt the familiar panic rising at the sound of the word, but as it was just the two of them, and he owed it to her to be honest, he nodded. "Yes." "And he loves you?" "I think so. Yes, he does." "That's all I need to know, then." She smiled again. She let out a great sigh. "Love. It's the only thing you get to take with you, you know."
Oh, that was a pretty good chapter. They didn't build up Remus's mom enough for me to really care too much about her.
I didn't care about that at all.
It was a nice chapter.
It was okay.
That's what I mean. It was like, it was good.
It was alright. I was bored.
Well, yeah. But it's like, setting up this whole thing, their life or whatever. It's just another setup chapter.
Yeah, I know. Everything's got to be picture perfect so
like,
that it can be destroyed.
Yeah. It's like the first chapter had to set up the Order of the Phoenix. This is going to set up their life outside of school. So, that being said, next chapter, some interesting things will probably happen.
I hope so.
I don't know what. Maybe Remus gets to go on another werewolf mission to fix what he started in the bar.
Maybe. I don't know.
Or maybe Marlene's gonna confront him and be like, "What'd you do
to my brother, you dingus?
I trusted you." Oh, and hello, Patrick. Welcome.
I need to just take 5.
Okay.
Take my eyes away from the screen for a second, and you just want to charge it for like 5 seconds.
Okay.
I don't want it to almost die while we're reading.
Is this the chapter we're supposed to care and cry whenever? Yeah, I think so. Remus's mom was kind of they introduced her too late. They didn't build her up enough for me to really get sad over this. I mean, I thought the chapter was written very well, and if I did have the chance to get to know Lupin's mother more, it probably would have been very heart-wrenching. But we got her in she got 2-3 chapters, maybe? Or
Yeah, that was it. There were only 2-3 chapters where she actually made an appearance.
yeah. So yeah, 2-3 chapters. Yeah, but you know, these are necessary chapters for the setup, so I think next chapter should be something a little bit more interesting. Or it's going to be another mushy chapter where we go to the funeral. And we get to meet some more random people that probably won't be mentioned again in the story.
I think it's just that I just don't really care anymore. I don't know. Maybe that's my issue. I'm just having
You
a hard time
gotta keep an
caring.
open mind.
I'm trying.
It's gotten better.
It's gotten better. But I don't know, I feel like Lupin doesn't deserve to be happy with Sirius right now. Just like,
You're just mad about how he treated Sirius.
I am.
But,
And, like, Sirius is, like, the domestic one, kind of? Buying the apartment and doing all the stuff. Like, I don't know.
yeah, Remus better treat him nice. Sirius went out of his way and got him a telephone.
To talk to another man.
Yeah. A little weird. But Sirius really trusts him. Or maybe
Radar Eater was funny.
Maybe they're into that. Radar Eater was great. For a second there, Potter sounded like Mr. Weasley.
He did.
Sounded like Arthur. A telephone? A Radar Eater?
That stuff, that's the stuff I like. That was good. That was funny.
Yeah, Ben. Bad timing. Should have introduced his mom a little bit earlier. And dang, that's dark. The happy ending is that Lupin had a terrible life. I mean, that kind of is canon, though.
Yeah, Lupin did have a terrible
He
life.
had a really bad life. Well, after school. He didn't have as bad of a life in school.
Yeah, I don't know. Lupin just... The whole mom thing was just... It was well written. I just didn't care.
Fellitone.
Yeah, that's what Arthur called it. A fellitone.
Fellitone. Yeah. I don't... Yeah, that's what I mean. That's how it reads, Maddie. Like, she had to be introduced earlier for us to kind of care and forgive her for, you know, abandoning her child and not visiting, not even trying to get in contact with him or anything like that.
She doesn't ever really even explain why she abandoned him. Like, it's just a, like, yeah, I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Thing. Like, so, because
I couldn't do it. Forgive me. And Remus was, yeah, I guess. Maybe. And he comes in and he's just like, they've grown to the point where he'll kiss her on the cheek. But we didn't see that journey.
I mean, stuff like that, I guess you don't have to, but if you're going to introduce that plot point that seems like it should be pretty important, you want to have more than 2 scenes of them hanging out together.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like he should have discovered something really important about his dad, or there should have been a reason for that plot point to occur, to drive the story forward. There really wasn't.
Yeah. I agree that it didn't really drive the story. It was just a side plot. That, it's just... I don't know, maybe they just felt like they had to introduce his mother some way. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Either way.
Okay. Yeah, she's not written in any compelling way. She's just a dying lady. That's what Maddie said. Like, I don't even care about her cancer. I don't care about any of that. Me either. I don't care.
You're just vicious to the story.
I am. I'm having a hard time forgiving it. I really am.
What's the next chapter called? I've been kind of theorizing what's going to happen. It's either going to be another mission or we're going to have the funeral.
Autumn 1978.
Probably The Funeral. It's autumn. All movie funerals take place in the autumn. Leaves falling. It may or may not be rainy, but most likely cloudy, at least. Overcast.
Let's see.
Okay.
Let's see. Chapter 154. The War. Autumn 1978. Stop your messing about. Better think about your future. Time you straighten right out. Creating problems in town.
That's. I can't think of the commercial. There was a commercial like that back in the 90s.
I was trying really hard not to do. One depressed Lupin. Two depressed Lupin. Remus peered over the top of his book through the cafe window to see if there had been any change in the street ahead of him. He looked at the clock on the greasy wall beside him. 5 minutes to go, if Pete wasn't running late. Remus looked at his book again. He hadn't really been reading it. He was too distracted. He found himself rarely in the mood for studying these days, between order meetings, strange and half-explained assignments, visiting Hope in the hospice, which he tried to do every other day now. Oh, she's still alive. That's great. On top of this, Remus and Sirius were learning to look after themselves for the first time. After a week of takeaways, Remus admitted defeat and asked to borrow a recipe book from Mrs. Potter. Results had been mixed so far. Sirius, meanwhile, seemed to have reached crisis point at the state of the bathroom and dedicated several evenings to finally learning some cleaning spells. They had a fight over whether or not to get a television. Sirius was bizarrely suspicious of this Muggle technology. He couldn't see the point. And then another one over the motorbike. Remus hated everything about it, but most of all the highly dangerous flying charm Sirius was attempting. Other than that, things were going pretty well. Well as anyone could expect. The clock kept ticking. Remus lifted the chipped mug of tea to his lips, drank, then grimaced. Stone cold. He'd been here an hour at least, but it wasn't as if he'd had anywhere else to be. Since the botched mission to Nocturne Alley back in July, Remus had noticed a clear shift in the nature of his missions. He was often paired with Peter, and generally only went on soft assignments, passing on messages, collecting dead portkeys. Once or twice he'd been stuck making sandwiches for visitors to the Potters. Meanwhile, James and Sirius's fortunes had taken them in a completely different direction. They both spent much of their time with Frank and Alice, or the Pruitt twins, up to all sorts of interesting things like advanced defense, guard duties, and even 1 or 2 midnight raids. Sirius was having the time of his life. Remus was miserable, but not saying so. Fucking shocker. Oh my god.
Sirius deserves to have a good time.
Sirius does.
Lupin.
Right. In other words, business as usual. Finally, Remus looked up and saw movement. It was the end of the working day, and men in smart suits and hats began to fill the pavements. If you looked very closely, you could see that some of these men and women were dressed a little bit less conservatively than the others. It was the end of the day at the Ministry of Magic, too. Remus got up quickly, banging his shins on the orange plastic chair beside him. Hissing through his teeth, he limped slightly on his way out. Outside it was muggy, not sunny, but hot and sticky, headache weather. Thick, queasy storm clouds hung above the grey buildings, and a powerful reek rose up from the cafe bins, old food putrefying in the unreasonable September heat. Remus hung back a moment, waiting and watching, not wanting to be seen. A tall, handsome young man strode past, wearing black robes and a bottle-green waistcoat. He had sharp cheekbones and platinum hair. Though he was very young, Remus recognized him at once as Lucius Malfoy, the man Narcissa had risked her life to marry. Remus watched him stalk up the street, fleetingly commending Sirius's cousin on her excellent taste. "Oh, hello, Moony." Remus jumped. Peter somehow still had the ability to take him by surprise. You almost never saw him coming.
What?
Come on.
Ew.
No,
Peter.
you never saw him coming. Like the betrayal.
Oh, yeah.
Christ, Pete, you scared me. Well, if you hadn't been perving on Malfoy's arse... Shut up. Remus was already in a bad mood and much too sensitive to be teased by Peter Pettigrew of all people. Didn't expect to see you, Peter was saying, glancing at his pocket watch and tucking it back into his trouser pocket. He was wearing a tweed jacket and a stupid little bowler hat, mustard-coloured. He looked like an off-brand leprechaun. Remus scolded himself internally, ashamed of himself for being jealous of his friend, who, despite only having scooped up a hand of NEWTs, had managed to walk into an entry-level position in the ministry. No bother. What do you mean? Remus frowned. I'm on time, aren't I? Didn't you get Arthur's message? Peter looked up at him innocently. Got cancelled. They sent Caradoc. Oh, Remus pursed his lips. So we can go home, Peter said cheerily. Thank Godric too. I'm exhausted. Work was mayhem today. I'm rushed off my feet. Right, of course, Remus nodded, his shoulders slumping. He hadn't got out of bed until midday. Then all he'd done was read the papers and smoke and eat half a loaf of bread, which Sirius had bought only the morning before. This had been his longest conversation with another human being all day. Are you sure they don't need us? He said hopefully. Maybe if we went along anyway. Best not, Peter shook his head. You know what Moody's like about protocol. Anyway, I'm starving. I barely had time for lunch. Really? Want to go and get something at the Leaky Cauldron? Sorry, promised Mum I'd be home. No worries, you know. She worries, you know. Oh, of course. Padfoot's at your flat, isn't he? Yeah, he should be back by now. See you at the next meeting, Mooney. See you. They walked in opposite directions, Peter heading for the nearest flue grate. He still hadn't learned to apparate. Remus for the nearest quiet alley so he could slink into and vanish in peace. He tried to cheer up a bit as he stood outside the door to his flat. He shook himself, attempted to clear his mind, forced a smile. He opened the door. You're back early, Sirius's voice trilled from the kitchen, and that was enough to throw Remus back into his dark mood. It felt like an accusation. He grunted, shutting the door and pulling off his cardigan, the hairs on his arms itching and prickling in the heat. It made his scars raise too, like barbed wire. What's up? Sirius appeared. He'd showered recently. His hair still gleamed. Something happened? Remus snorted, kicking his shoes off and flinging them under the coffee table. Nothing happened. It got cancelled. Or someone else did it. Doesn't matter anyway, it was just busy work. No, it wasn't, Sirius tutted. Why would Dumbledore give you busy work? Because I can't be trusted to do anything else, because they still want to keep me on side, so I don't go suddenly evil. Mooney! Sirius had his hands on his hips now. Remus sighed and waved a hand. Forget about it. How was your day? It was busy. Long, Sirius said carefully, obviously not wanting to provoke Remus any further. The usual stuff, you know. I don't know, Remus muttered. You get to hang around with auras all day. The best I get is Wormtail. Don't be like that, Sirius sat beside Remus on the couch. You're doing plenty of useful stuff still, and they sent you on that mission at the beginning of the summer. That was huge. Remus didn't say anything. He hadn't told Sirius what had happened, how he'd lost control yet again, and how Moody clearly didn't trust him anymore, and Danny probably hated him. In the pause that followed, Sirius tutted. Look, if you're in a mood, I'd rather just get out of your way. I haven't had a brilliant day either. Fine, Remus said sharply. It wasn't fine. Part of him wanted to grab Sirius for a kiss, pull him into the bedroom, and apologize for being a dick. The other part wanted a full-blown fight with lots of shouting and swearing. Either way, he didn't want Sirius going anywhere. Sirius sighed and got up. Fine then. He grabbed his keys on the way out. Going to work on the bike, he said. I'll get bread on the way back, seeing as how we've run out again. Remus grunted in response, staring at a hole in his sock rather than meet Sirius's eye. They'd make it up later. They always did. The problem with not being at Hogwarts was that Remus never had any idea where anyone was. He missed the Marauders map sorely, and felt anxious when he pictured Sirius, James and Peter out in the world, facing who knows what. It typified the way he felt about almost everything now that school was over. At Hogwarts he'd been in control, he'd had a place, a certain status. In the real world, he was nothing and nobody, back to the bottom of the deck. As a mature and educated young man, he knew that he ought to face these new challenges with fortitude, set out to prove his worth like James and Sirius, and even Pete. But Remus didn't. He sulked. After the cancelled mission with Peter, there'd been another long and confusing meeting with the Order, and barely anyone had glanced in Remus's direction. Moody hadn't been there, nor Ferox, so Remus couldn't even go and ask them whether or not there'd been any developments on the Greyback front. It was nice to see the girls. Lily was apprenticing in the potions research department at St. Mungo's, and she and Marlene had made a whole gang of new friends at the hospital. Mary was at Muggle's secretarial college and, like Remus, had been unimpressed with her assignments in the Order so far. "Suppose they don't want my mucky blood blowing up anyone's cover," she rolled her eyes. He snickered. Good old Mary. Since that meeting, Remus had spent much of his time alone. He slept in, listened to the radio, went downstairs to the corner shop to buy fags, and pretended to read. He told Sirius he was researching defensive magic, but he couldn't see the point in studying for no reason. Remus was sprawled on the couch one day doing the crossword in a free paper he'd picked up somewhere. Well, he wasn't so much doing the crossword as trying to write the most imaginative swear words he could think of in the boxes. He was stuck on 12 down. Blank, 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 E, blank, 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 F, when the phone rang. It made him jump. The phone never rang. Hello? He said croakily, realizing it was after 1 o'clock in the afternoon and the first time he'd spoken. "Watcha, sweetheart?" "Grant?" "Someone else calling you sweetheart, you slag." Remus laughed, grinning from ear to ear. "Sarky tosser, how have you been?" "Here and there. Sorry, I've had a bit of a busy summer. You at home then?" "Yeah." "Brilliant, I'm 5 minutes away." "What?" "See you soon." The line went dead. Not knowing what else to do and mildly stunned, Remus went to the bathroom quickly to check himself in the mirror. He was wearing a creased t-shirt and threw on a jumper on the floor to cover up his scarred forearms. His hair never seemed to change no matter what he did, so he ran his fingers through the curls and watched them spring back into place. He wished he'd showered when he woke up that morning, but it was too late now. There was a knock at the door and Remus hurried to answer it, pointing his wand at the kettle as he passed the kitchen door to flick it on. His pulse quickened and he realized how excited he was to see someone not involved in the war. He wrenched the door open harder than he needed to so that it nearly slammed into the wall. "Hiya!" Grant stood in the doorway, wide-eyed but grinning, his face round and sunny as it had been at 15, chipped tooth and bright clothes and everything else that was right in the world. "Hi," Remus breathed, standing back to allow Grant entry. "I'm so happy to see you." "Blimey!" Grant nudged him with his trainer as he came inside. If I'd have known this as a sort of welcome I'd have shown up weeks ago." He stood in the middle of the living room, hands on his hips, staring around it in awe. He let out a low whistle. "Done all right for yourself here, eh? Very nice." "Yeah, I suppose." Remus rubbed the back of his head. It was a bit messy, old newspapers and half-empty mugs of tea all over the place, not to mention the overflowing ashtrays. Suddenly he was very embarrassed. "What you got a fireplace for?" Grant chuckled. "Thought these modern flats had all central heating." Remus mumbled. "Cup of tea?" "Champion." Remus went into the kitchen and used a bit of wordless magic to hurry it along before bringing the mugs through to the living room, where Grant stood inspecting the bookcase. He looked so well. His clothes were clean and smart. He was even wearing a dress shirt which had a wide floral collar and cuffs. Remus gave him his tea and did a bit of quick tidying before sitting down. "I can't believe you're here," he said. Grant laughed. "Me neither, to be honest. Been a long time, eh?" "How was your holiday?" "Oh, Grant appeared to be blushing. His ears turned cherry red. "That was a bit of a fib. I just didn't want to jinx anything." "Jinx what? What have you been doing?" "I Look, don't laugh at me, all right? I've been doing evening classes. You know, get me O-levels. He looked down. That's brilliant, Remus said. Grant looked up at him cautiously, as if waiting for the punchline. Better late than never, I suppose. I had my CSE maths exam today over in Russell Square. Bloody difficult, but I reckon I did enough to pass. Fucking Pythagoras was a right tosser, eh? Remus laughed. Well done, though. What brought that on? Want to do some work somewhere other than a pub one day? Grant shrugged. Shagging all them students opened me eyes a bit. Don't want to be a thicko my whole life. You're not thick, Remus said firmly, giving him a stern look. Well, we'll see. Grant waved a hand, shy again. I forget me maths and me English sorted, and I reckon I did okay in English too. You ought to see my spelling. It's miles better. Then I'm hoping I can start A-levels in January. I want to do psychology, I think. Psychology? Remus said in awe. Yeah, Grant chuckled. Ricky, that's one of the students I was seeing. He reckoned I'd do better with politics, but to be honest, I'd have ended up here with Trotsky. He was a communist. Trotsky? Ricky. Right. Remus sipped his tea thoughtfully. Everyone was doing things. Everyone had a direction. And here he was, just sitting by and watching, as per usual. Self-hatred rose up inside him. So, how's Sirius? Grant asked politely. He's good. He's just, he's out just now. Uni lecture. Nice. And, your mum? How's she? Dying, Remus grunted. Bummer. Remus practically spat out his tea, laughing. Grant grinned. Oh, did you hear about St. Eddie's? What about it? Remus frowned. Shut down. Last approved school in Britain, apparently. They're all community homes now. What happened to all the boys? Some of them got sent to Borstal. Rest got rehoused. They're knocking it down, putting up flats instead. Good riddance, Remus said darkly. I'll drink to that, Grant snorted, raising his mug of tea. They chatted for a bit longer, reminiscing. Grant wasn't seeing anyone serious and didn't know how much longer he'd be in Brighton. He missed London, but he knew he needed to save up more money if he wanted to move back and make a proper go of it. He was so different than the last time Remus had seen him. Enough about me. What about you? You at uni too? I'm not really doing anything, Remus sighed. It's hard to get a job right now. I've mostly just been here. Lucky you got this set up, eh? Grant gestured round, picking up the cigarette box on the table and shaking it. Remus nodded and took one himself. Yeah, lucky, he said glumly as he lit it. You need to get out more, sweetheart, Grant said, sounding serious. What? Grant tutted, blowing smoke and looking Remus up and down. Look at you, you miserable git. I'm not blind, you know. Cooped up in here feeling sorry for yourself, is it? No, Remus, Grant sighed, shaking his head. I'm not being horrible, I'm just saying. Remember when I left St. Edmunds and I lived in that squat? Yeah. Remus wished he could forget that, but it burned in his memory. The dirty mattresses, the bare floorboards, the damp. Thought it was great at first. No more school, no more matron telling me what to do, just me looking out for myself. He shook his head, pursing his lips. I like running away. I done it all the time when I was a kid. Run away from me mum, from me granddad, the prick, from everywhere else, from anywhere people tried to keep me in. And the thing is, they always let me. Matron never called the police. Mum never tried to find me. Actually, you were the only person ever tried to track me down. Remus hadn't known that. I don't know how you did it, Grant chuckled, scratching his chin. Maybe you've got a magic wand or something, but you found me. Twice. I thought about that a lot over the past year. I just wanted to make sure you were okay. I know you did, Grant said softly. That's what amazed me. Here's this lad, this clever, funny, posho lad, who gives a shit about me when no one ever else did. Made me feel like someone worthwhile. So I thought I'd better do something worthwhile. Remus didn't know what to say. He put his tea down. That's why I wanted to wait till my exams were done before I saw you, Grant continued. Even if I failed a lot, I wanted to tell you I'd done it. I'm trying to be better. You never needed to prove anything to me, Remus said earnestly. I know, Grant nodded. I did it for me, really. I did it because running away and avoiding all that stuff that made me feel like shit was pointless in the end. If you want people to think you're worth it, you've got to start acting like you want it. Remus laughed humorlessly. Sounds like you're already taking psychology. Been reading lots, Grant winked. You get what I'm telling you then? Yes, Remus sighed. Do something worthwhile. Stop moping. Good, Grant said brightly. Because if you're not happy here, I'll switch with you. Nice flat, lots of books, gorgeous boyfriend. Remus laughed again and kicked Grant's shin playfully. Shut up. Never. Anyway, best be off. I've got a train to catch. I'll be popping back in a month or so long as I get my results I need. You will, Remus said confidently. I know you will. Cheers. Give me a ring soon, eh? They hugged at the door and Remus watched him go, hopping down the steps 2 at a time, whistling a pop tune. Remus felt lighter. His cheeks ached from smiling. He closed the door and looked at the messy room. He felt like doing the washing up. Then he might nip out to the shops and get something in for dinner. Sirius had been out all day. He'd like coming home to a proper meal. Tomorrow, Remus would make a proper start on everything else. There was so much to do.
Grant, what a beauty. He's the best.
Grant is the best. He is the best character of this story.
Always love a Grant chapter.
Gotta love a Grant chapter.
Sirius is the perfect boyfriend. Maybe that's the point of the story. We're not supposed to care about Lupin. This is setting up so Sirius's death hurts even more. He spent his whole life in the beginning being abused by his mother. Then he was abused by Lupin. Then he was abused by Dementors. Then he was abused by Dumbledore by being locked in the house by himself the whole time. And then he finally gets one moment of freedom to do what he wants, and he dies.
Maybe. Maybe that's it. Yeah, right, Maddie? Love Grant. Can't stand Remus. Can't stand him.
Give us the Grant story.
I want the Grant story. I don't want Remus's story. Because literally, he's literally sitting here going, Sirius is finally having a good time. And what does Remus do? Be an asshole about it. And make Sirius, like... At least Sirius was like, fine, if you're like this, I'm not going to be around you.
That's right. Stand up for yourself, Sirius.
That's right. Stand up for yourself. Go away. Go work on your magic motorbike, bud. Don't be around that toxicity.
Just because Remus is depressed, he needs to take it out on someone.
Yep.
Remus needs some chocolate. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like king size.
He needs a Kit Kat, Big Cat.
Exactly.
Something. This chapter was only good because of Grant. Otherwise, it sucked.
I was almost expecting, like, Remus to wake up or something, and it was his conscience again.
I was just, like, starting to get so annoyed because he was, like, part of him wanted to just whatever, but part of him wanted to have a screaming match with Sirius. And I'm like, why? Why?
Yeah.
Like, just because Sirius gets to do stuff and you had a disaster the last time you did something. Like, I don't know. Grant was good, though.
He was.
I'm also very happy for Grant that he is
getting his life together.
Getting his life together, getting his O levels, gonna go to school.
Didn't get AIDS and die like we predicted.
Yes, I'm so yes. I am happy about that.
I love that's just how we thought about Grant in the beginning. Like, oh, he's gonna go off to this trap house, get AIDS,
die.
and he's gonna die.
Yep.
Because it's the 70s.
Well,
nope. Grant turned into the best character in the story.
Grant is the best character in the story. He really is.
The most successful character in the story, too.
Right? Yeah. He's like really taking life on. Doing good stuff.
Now, if only Lupin can maintain that course that Grant is setting for him.
Right? Well, shall we see what happens next?
Yeah, what's the next chapter called?
The War, winter 1978 to 1979.
Alright, maybe Lupin's finally gonna get a mission again.
I hope Grant doesn't end up like Ginny. Oh, me too. Oh my god, no. Chapter 155. The War.
Does that make Remus Forrest?
No, Remus is like Lieutenant Dan.
Yeah, he kinda is. But you ain't got no legs, Lieutenant Dan.
The War, winter 1978, 1979. Let's see what the song is.
Grant's Forest. No matter what the challenge is, he kept pushing and accomplishes himself. Grant's gonna be the head of Bubba Gump Shrimp.
Rows and rows and flows of angel hair, and ice cream castles in the air, and feather canyons everywhere. I've looked at clouds that way, but now they only block the sun. They rain and snow on everyone. So many things I could have done, but clouds got in my way.
Very nice.
Saturday, 23rd of December, 1978. Jesus Christ, Remus grumbled, opening his sticky eyes. He fumbled on the bedside for his glass of water and found it empty. Aguamenti, he rasped, his wand hand shaking. The glass filled with water and he gulped it down greedily. He rolled on his back, pressing the heels of his hands into his eyes, hoping to mitigate the headache threatening to start gnawing on his brain. He turned his head slightly and addressed the lump under the duvet. You awake? There was a sort of a shudder and a grunt. Remus tutted. It was too hot in the bedroom, even for December. He got up and went to the window to crack it open. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass and let the cold air wash over his hot skin. They'd been out at the Leaky Cauldron the night before, pre-Christmas drinks. The Marauders and Lily would be spending Christmas itself at the Potters, but everyone else who was working had finished for the year, and Mary had suggested blowing off some steam away from the older members of the Order of the Phoenix for once. As with most of Mary's ideas, it was brilliant fun. Marlene came and brought Yaz, who was visiting the McKinnons because her family didn't do Christmas anyway. Frank and Alice popped in to say hello, and Sirius and James insisted on getting in on every other round. After last orders, those still standing had piled into a taxi back to Remus and Sirius's flat, where there may not have been any milk and bread, but the bar was always fully stocked. Everything else had been a blur after that. Remus had a horrible feeling that he and Lily had started singing Muggle Christmas carols at some point. He groaned loudly. Why do you let me drink so much? Oh, don't blame me. Lily suddenly appeared, her fluffy red hair sticking up like a dandelion as she emerged from under the duvet. Remus jumped, whirling round. He wrapped his arms protectively around himself. Fucking hell, Evans, what are you doing here? Couldn't get James to leave, she yawned, and I wasn't going to sleep on the couch. They started building a fort. This is the second time you've shown up in my bedroom unannounced, Evans. People will talk. Remus searched for a t-shirt. Second time I've caught you in your pants, too, she laughed. Oh, get back in, you big Jessie, it's still early. He did, but only because the room was cold now, and he didn't fancy finding out what James and Sirius had done to the living room. T-shirt on, he crawled back under the duvet, and Lily wrapped her arms round his waist, her long hair tickling under his chin, like Sirius's did. He stroked her shoulder. She was so nice and small. Do you reckon if I'd agreed to go out with you in fourth year, this is what our life would be like? He asked conversationally. Oh, God, she groaned, covering her ears with her fingers. Do you have to remind me? He laughed. I don't know why you're embarrassed. I was the oblivious one. I had such a crush on you. Shh, he chuckled. James took weeks to forgive me. I had to swear under truth serum that I had no nefarious intentions towards you. That idiot. I love him. I'm so glad it's Christmas, she sighed. We all need a break, don't we? Yeah. I'm supposed to be packing today, then at James's parents' this evening. Will you be there? Sirius might, Remus said. I'm visiting my mother. You know, she's in hospice now. Oh, of course. Lily gave him a squeeze. Sorry, love. How is she? I don't think they expected her to make it all the way to Christmas, but she's hanging on. Oh, Remus, Lily sighed sadly. It's fine. Remus pulled away, deciding he might as well get up after all. Right, I need a cup of tea and a ciggy, he said, getting out of bed and pulling his jeans on. Ugh, you two really need to give up smoking, Lily said, sitting up. The duvet stinks. Don't ever tell me you've had a cheeky post-coital fag, Evans, Remus winked, heading for the door. Oh my God, Remus! He was still smirking to himself when he entered the living room, which looked like a bomb had hit it. The sofa had been moved to the middle of the room for some reason, and the cushions removed. James was fast asleep, sprawled across what looked like a giant cream mattress on the floor. James was curled up at Sirius's feet with one of Remus's jumpers rolled up under his head. Remus edged into the kitchen, flicking the kettle on. Every surface was sticky with something sweet and alcoholic. There were mugs and glasses sitting about, half full, some with half-smoked cigarettes floating in them. Remus grimaced and felt his stomach contract, so he opened a window for air. He really didn't want to be sick if he could help it. Mary had written "Merry Christmas, Bloody Traitors" on the fridge door in cheerful pink lipstick, with 3 big exit kisses below it. She was spending the rest of her Christmas in Jamaica, the first time she'd ever really visited her grandparents' home country. Remus was glad of it. Christmas had never been a good time as far as the war was concerned, and having Mary as far away from danger as possible made him feel a little bit better. He wasn't thrilled about doing Christmas at the Potters, though he felt guilty for even thinking that. Sirius would never consider spending the holiday anywhere else, so of course Remus would go along with it. And it wasn't anything to do with Mr. and Mrs. Potter, who'd been better than him than any other real family he had. It was the war in the Order, and bloody Moody, who was sure to be there too. Is that the kettle? Sirius wailed from the living room. Yep, Remus called back. 2 ticks. You're a hero. You're a hero amongst men, Mooney, James said when Remus arrived in the living room with a tray of...
Oh, bless you.
Thank you. With a tray of milky cups of tea. Oh, I know, Remus nodded, sipping from his cup. He perched on the arm of the sofa. The fuck have you done to my furniture? Brilliant, isn't it? Sirius grinned up at him, cross-legged on the gigantic sofa cushion. Prongs' idea. We did an engorgement charm. Shall we help you two clean up? Lily asked, padding through from the bedroom. She picked up a cup of tea and sat down next to James, leaning into his shoulder sleepily. Breakfast first, Remus said quickly. Fry up? Fry up, they all agreed in unison. They went to the nearest Greasy Spoon cafe and ordered full Englishes all round, after which everyone felt much better prepared to face the day. After breakfast, Sirius, Lily and James started work tidying the flat, while Remus, at Sirius's insistence, got himself ready to visit Hope. He didn't wear a suit. That would have been overkill, even at Christmas, but he made an effort, ironing his cleanest granddad shirt and putting on a brown corduroy jacket he'd picked up at a Portobello market. He even polished his shoes. Sirius had offered to come with him, but Remus preferred to go alone. It was easiest if he had time to process his interactions with Hope in private, which he hoped Sirius understood. Anyway, no one wanted to be stuck sitting in a building full of dying people 2 days before Christmas. The hospice itself was on the other side of Cardiff. It didn't feel much different from the hospital, except that the rooms were private and furnished with a bit more care. She had fresh flowers every day now, which was nice. Remus brought a poinsettia because Lily had told him they were Christmassy, and Hope was no longer eating solid food, so chocolates were out. Someone had wound gold and silver tinsel round her bed frame and blue-tacked Christmas cards to the wall. There were so many it looked as if she'd had special festive wallpaper. She said if you came while she was sleeping, I was to wake her up straight away, said the cheerful nurse on duty. Thanks, I'll wake her, His mother lay dozing in her big hospital bed. He wondered how tall she was, standing up. Quite small, he imagined, based on the pictures he had of her with Lyle and how tiny her hands were. He'd only ever seen her lying down, and now he realized he might never see her any other way. He touched her hand gently, squeezing it with his fingers. Her eyelids fluttered and she frowned, the pain evident in her face. She turned her head and saw him, and her brow smoothed at once. "Hello, my darling," she said thickly, as if her mouth were full of cotton wool. "Merry Christmas, Mum," he said, sitting down. I'm going to butcher this, so for anyone who speaks Welsh, I'm very sorry. "Nadalig Lawelyn," she said in neat, earthy Welsh. "How are you?" "Better for seeing you," she smiled. "I'm so glad you come." "Of course," he said earnestly. "It's Christmas." There'd been no talk of his visiting her on Christmas Day itself. They both skirted around the issue, and Remus assumed she wanted to spend it with her real family. She asked now, though. "Where will you be? At home with Sirius?" It was strange to hear her say his name, with her soft rolling R's. "At our friend's parents'," he replied. "The Potters. You met Mrs. Potter once. She told me. Euphemia." "I won't remember." She shook her head. "I'd invite you here, but it won't be much fun for you, I'm afraid." "Whatever you like, Mum," he said, hoping he didn't sound disappointed. "You'll be happier with your friends," she said, as if to herself. "Mr. Potter knew Lyle." Remus prodded a bit harder, wanting to talk about something more substantial. "They worked at the ministry together, and they went to the pub sometimes, and James, their son, he was born in March, same as me." "I don't remember," Hope said more forcefully this time. "I'm sorry, Remus, I don't. Lyle kept those things separate. It's often better that way. You'll learn." He thought about this. Thought about how little he'd known about his parents for most of his life, and how little he'd known about himself as a result. He thought about Sirius, and how they always fought because Remus wasn't open enough. How much it hurt other people to keep secrets, even when you were trying to protect them. "I don't agree," he said simply. "I don't think it's good to hide things all the time." "Well," Hope said. She looked away and withdrew her hand from his. Remus realized she was annoyed with him. It was an odd sensation and a first for their relationship. He wasn't sure how to react. If he'd known her all his life, then he would know what to do. It would be old hat, bickering with your mum. His temperature rose the more he thought about it. This was all her fault. Her stupid, stunted emotions. His complete inability to be comfortable with other... It was all her fault. His stupid, stunted emotions. His complete inability to be comfortable with other people. And here she was, avoiding him. He wanted her attention, and he only knew one way to get it. "Mrs. Potter, James's mum," he said. "She makes the best mince pies ever, and a full Christmas dinner. And she even gets me a present, even though I'm not her kid." Hope pursed her lips, but still did not look up. "She sounds nice," she said in a small, tight voice. Remus ploughed on. "Yeah, James is really lucky. I'd never even had a proper Christmas until I went to the Potters." "Yes, you did." She looked up at him suddenly, and she saw his own anger reflected in her eyes. "You did," she said. "We had lovely Christmases when you were little." She was staring at him as if he were mad, as if he was the one who was ill, not her. "Don't you remember the tree with the gold angel and the nativity set? I thought you'd swallowed baby Jesus one year, but you kept him under your pillow because I'd told you about nasty old King Herod and you wanted to keep him safe. You were so sweet. And we bought you that hobby horse and the pig farm set. You loved the farm set, the pink little piglets. I was forever finding them in the garden. And the hand puppets and the army tank. Remember your tank? I told Lyle you were too young, but you were a sensitive boy. I didn't like you playing wars, but you loved it. And Daddy used to make it move with his magic, and you'd always chatter away together for hours." She trailed off, clearly upset. Remus gawped at her. "I don't remember any of that, Mum," he said. He searched for her hand again and squeezed it. "I wished I did, though. It sounds nice. I think about you every year, she said tearfully, voice shaking. Every night I used to light the Advent candle and think about you, Remus. And I'd talk about you. I'd tell Sean about you too. He snapped to attention. She was watching him warily, as though afraid he might lash out. Aware of this, he kept his voice even. Could you tell me a bit about Sean? Hope gnawed her lip. She looked so exhausted from the pain and drugs and fucking cancer that he was starting to feel guilty. But they were almost out of time. She's 8, she said finally. She'll be 9 in February. And she's your daughter with Gethin? Remus asked, feeling as though all the air had left the room. Hope nodded, closing her eyes. Tears spilled out under her lashes, streaming down her cheeks. I never remarried, not after Lyle. But I fell in love. I had me Sean. Only Sean? She nodded again. Remus frowned. When I first came to you, the nurse said you were always talking about your kids. I thought you had more than one. I do. She looked at him puzzled, blinking through tears. You and Sean? Oh. He felt dreadful. All this time he thought he was one of Hope's terrible secrets. I've never been ashamed, she said, a note of defiance entering her voice. Not of my lovely boy. Never. Mum. He felt as though he'd been punched in the gut. He was crying too all of a sudden, and he squeezed her hand desperately. Come here. She reached out for him, and he got up to sit carefully on the edge of the bed, leaning over so that she could wrap her arms round him. He rested his head on her shoulder, trying not to put too much weight on her frail body, but she was stronger than he gave her credit for, and held him tightly. I'm sorry, Mum, he said, his words muffled by her soft nightgown. She smelled of talcum powder and lavender and family. She stroked his hair. You've got nothing to be sorry for, sweetheart. I love you. I love you too, he wept. I've looked at clouds from both sides now, from up and down, and still somehow it's cloud illusions I can recall. I really don't know clouds at all. Moons and Junes and Ferris wheels, the dizzy dancing way you feel as every fairy tale comes real. I've looked at love that way. But now it's just another show. You leave 'em laughing, then you go. And if you care, don't let them know. Don't give yourself away. He stayed at the hospice for longer than usual, and by the time he apparated to the Potters' front gate, he was exhausted. He felt like laundry that had been wrung out and splayed on a clothesline, weak and bare and empty. James had to question him at the door. It was second nature now. Which film did we see in the summer of 1974? The Great Gatsby, he replied grimly. James saw the look on his face and stepped aside at once. All right, Mooney? He asked, putting a hand on Remus's shoulder. Yeah, Remus nodded, hoping he just looked tired. I don't want to be rude, but would it be all right if I just went to bed? Tell your parents I'm really sorry. I'm just... Yeah, of course, mate, James said eagerly. You go up. I'll tell him you're knackered. I'll tell him you're knackered. Thank you, Remus smiled. He climbed the familiar stairs to bed. He really hoped Mrs. Potter wouldn't mind. He'd be fine in the morning, but just now he wasn't sure if his nerves could handle seeing her. She always hugged him too, and being hugged by one mother today was just about as much as he could take. Of course, it wasn't long before Sirius poked his head round the bedroom door. I'll leave you be if you want, he said, carrying in a tray loaded with cheese, pickle, ham, crackers, and of course, Mrs. Potter's famous mince pies. I just thought you might be peckish. I'm starving, Remus grinned at him. Thank you. Looking very pleased with himself, Sirius crossed the room more confidently and set the tray down on the bed between them. They sat quietly for a while, cross-legged on the duvet cover, Remus eating, Sirius pretending not to watch him. When he finished, Sirius took the tray away and Remus lay down, stretching out his aching limbs. Shall I go? Sirius asked. No, Remus said. Just don't expect too much, okay? Okay. He lay down next to Remus on his back. How's the hangover? Remus asked, remembering the state they'd all been in that morning. Fine, Sirius snorted. Evans and her potions. Great. Remus closed his eyes, letting the events of the day settle in his mind. It was good to have Sirius there, he decided. Being alone might be really awful. If only there was a way to express that without having it come out all wrong. I've got a sister, he said finally. She's 8. Wow. Sirius. He reached for Sirius's hand and held it. It took her months to tell me. God knows what else I don't know. I wish we had more time together. Sirius squeezed his hand sympathetically. Remus licked his lips, steeling himself for the next bit. I wish we had more time, but I also wish she would be more open. It really hurts knowing there are parts of her she keeps private. Oh? Sirius was doing an excellent job of keeping his cool. If Remus hadn't been so sad, it would be comical. Yeah, he said. He turned to look at Sirius. Sirius turned back to look at him. So I'm sorry, Remus said nervously, if I ever made you feel that way. Moony. It's just I get worried, Remus said quickly, that you won't, if you knew some things. There's nothing you could tell me that would change how I feel, Sirius said. Remus was speechless at that, but it was a good feeling. A happy feeling, even considering the circumstances. He couldn't look at Sirius anymore, so he rolled over onto his side. Luckily, Sirius seemed to understand and followed suit, draping an arm across Remus's body. Remus breathed out slowly. The mission I did, back in the summer, it went really badly, he said, feeling the weight already lifting. I thought something bad happened, Sirius said. Go on. Do you remember how I got the last time the werewolves were nearby? Like, really pushy and sort of not thinking? That happened again. No one got hurt, but I'm pretty sure Danny thinks I'm dangerously mad now. It didn't happen to him? I think he must have felt it, but we reacted differently. I sort of took charge. Not on purpose, it just felt natural at the time. Yeah, that makes sense, Sirius said. That's what you do on the full moon. We have to let you be leader. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it like that. So, if no one got hurt, what happened? One of the werewolves tried to attack me, but I overpowered him, Remus said. I was supposed to get information, but all I did was rile them up. What did Moody say about it? He was cryptic. I don't think he was angry. He asked me if I minded going alone next time, without Danny. But he hasn't sent me on any other missions. Not proper ones, and it's been months. They've got to be saving you for something, Sirius said. I know they have to be. James keeps telling Frank and Alice how good you are at defensive magic, and they say they just can't do anything without an order from someone above them. Maybe, Remus sighed. Did he really say you had to go alone next time? He didn't say I had to, just asked if I minded. I don't think there's any other way. Danny won't work with me again, he's too scared. So I suppose, yeah, it'll just be me next time. Sirius's arm tightened round Remus. I hate that. Remus didn't have a response, and Sirius didn't seem to be looking for one, so they just lay like that quietly for a while until Remus fell asleep. Boxing Day, 1978. As Lily had predicted, Christmas Day, 1978, was a welcome break from everyone's troubles. In fact, perhaps because it had been a particularly difficult year, Remus always remembered that Christmas as one of the most pleasant and happy that they had together. Mr. and Mrs. Potter were slowing down a bit. Euphemia said she wasn't up to hosting a big party as she usually did, and anyway the ministry had warned against large social gatherings. Mr. Potter had to be locked out of his study. James and Sirius stole the key, but he saw the funny side and joined in with festivities wholeheartedly. Remus noted that this year it was really James and Lily who were the hosts. She coordinated most of the cooking and decorating, the card writing, while he made sure that everyone always had a drink, that all of the usual Christmas games were played, and that the house was full of joy at all times. As for presents, it was all the usual fare. Sweets and nuts and candied fruit, new socks and underwear, a pair of pyjamas from Lily as a joke, so I can stop catching you in your knickers, and a shiny new pair of Doc Martens from Sirius. Surprisingly, Remus also received a gift from Grant that year, and felt guilty for not getting him one in return. He laughed when he opened it. A filofax organizer. Grant had written his own address and phone number in the first page, and in the back there were and in the back where the notes had been written, and in the back where the notes had been written the heading, New Year's Resolutions Number 1, Stop and Smell the Roses. Christmas Day done and over with, James and Lily were heading to the Evanses for Boxing Day. James was absolutely dreading it, having met Lily's sister twice already and failed to impress her either time. So Sirius and Remus went back to their own home to settle in and get ready for New Year. Sirius rather liked the idea of hosting his own party, and Remus was prepared to give in as long as they only invited people they knew. "How many do you reckon we can fit into this flat anyway?" Remus asked as they opened the door. "It's not like we have a ballroom, there's only one sofa." "We ought to just knock through the kitchen, have it all open plan," Sirius replied as they walked in. The phone was ringing and he went to answer it. "Hello?" He frowned and held the phone out for Remus. "For you, I think." Remus took the receiver from him. Of course it was for him. Sirius didn't know anyone who could use a telephone. "Hello?" "Hello?" "Hello? Is this Remus Lupin?" It was a man with a deep voice and a broad Welsh accent. Remus's insides went cold, and he sat down on the arm of the couch, steadying himself. "Yeah, that's right." "Ah, good. Ah, my name's Gethin Reese." Remus swallowed and found his throat dry. Is she... She's gone, isn't she?" There was a long quiet on the other end of the phone, and Remus began to cry. Finally, Gethin spoke, his own voice sounding very rough. "I'm sorry, lad. Funeral's next Wednesday." I'm gonna keep singing this song, and I keep butchering it every time. "I've looked at love from both sides now, from give and take, and still somehow it's love's illusions I recall. I really don't know love at all. Tears and fears and feeling proud to say I love you right out loud. Dreams and schemes and circus crowds, I've looked at life that way. But now old friends are acting strange. They shake their heads, they say I've changed. Well, something's lost, but something's gained in living every day." Wednesday, 3rd of January, 1979. Remus sighed, staring out their bedroom window, watching the raindrops sliding down the glass. When he was a little boy and it rained, he would sit on the biggest windowsill he could find at St. Edmund's and pick 2 droplets, then pretend they were racing to the bottom of the pane, an idea he got from a poem. Maybe one Hope had read him, which he'd forgotten now. It always rained at funerals in films. That was called pathetic fallacy. Remus had read about it at an old A-level English textbook. Of course, if you had a funeral in Wales in January, the chances of rain were extremely high too. It was a strange thing to be glad about, but it seemed proper. A sunny day would have been intolerable. "Ready?" Sirius asked very gently, entering the room. Remus looked up at him, feeling numb, and nodded. Sirius looked gorgeous in a black suit, his hair tied back. Remus felt scruffy. Though they were dressed identically, Sirius just wore clothes better. Remus had wanted to cut his hair short, to make it look tidier, but he'd been convinced not to in the end. Still, the urge to do something drastic was there. "Take your time," Sirius said. "We've got an hour or so." Remus nodded again. The service was supposed to start at 11, but Gethin had said that if he wanted to come early and greet the mourners, he was welcome to. Remus still wasn't sure. Sirius closed the bedroom door and came to sit next to him. He held his hand and stared out of the window too. "Have you ever been to a funeral before?" Remus asked finally. "Uncle Alphard's," Sirius replied. "I was really little, though, 9 or 10. Don't remember it. I've never lost anyone close." Remus inclined his head, still watching the raindrops against the grey sky. "I don't know if I knew Hope all that well. I didn't even know her for a whole year." "I don't think that matters." "Nor do I." Remus bowed his head. He wasn't going to cry again. He didn't think he could. It had felt good at first, a big rush of emotion, but since then, nothing. Just a blankness, an empty feeling he hadn't felt before. Sirius gripped his hand again. "I'll be with you the whole time." Remus looked at him and smiled weakly. "Thank you. Okay, I think I'm ready." He stood up, finally whirring into action. "Oh, shit," he said, slapping his forehead. "The flowers, Padfoot. I forgot to pick up the bloody flowers." Sirius put a hand on his shoulders. "I got Wormtail to do it. He's got them. And Lily's got the address for the church, so we won't get lost. Prongs has the food for the wake. His mum sent along some pork pies and sausage rolls, and I've got the umbrellas sorted. All you need to do is apparate. Everything else is taken care of, all right?" Overwhelmed, Remus grabbed him and hugged him tightly. "Thank you," he said. Sirius hugged him back. "Anything for our Moony, eh?" Remus smiled, breathing in Sirius's hair, his scent, letting it anchor him. The words popped into his head almost out of nowhere. And finally, it was easy to say. "Sirius?" he whispered, still holding on. "Yeah?" "Love you." Sirius kissed his cheek, huffing a soft laugh that sounded like relief. "Love you too." They walked into the living room hand in hand. James and Peter were also in suits, and Lily in a simple black dress, her usually vibrant hair neatly tied back in a bun. She was carrying an enormous bouquet of flowers. They all gave Remus cautious, sympathetic smiles, which he was getting used to now. He nodded at them all gratefully. "Right," Sirius said, taking charge. "Let's do this." It was a small village church just outside of Hope's hometown. It was where she'd been christened, and if she had married a muggle, it was where the wedding would have been. Remus knew from their brief conversations that Hope had not been particularly religious, but that her family belonged to the Church of Wales, so she went along for tradition's sake. It was a very pretty building, or at least it would have been if it wasn't raining so hard. Soft grey granite, with a bell tower and a pointed steeple, simple but pretty stained glass windows, like a church in a picture book. The graveyard was full of ancient tombstones and stone crosses, but Hope would be cremated, as per her wishes. The Marauders and Lily approached slowly, walking up the sodden pathway to join the cluster of mourners gathered in the doorway. Remus spotted Gethin straight away, standing just inside the porch, shaking hands with each attendee as they entered. He was a tall man like Lyle, but not as spindly. He had dark hair, thick black eyebrows, and rather a weak chin. He looked completely broken, and Remus was instantly less nervous about meeting him. Lily, James, and Peter hung back, looking for somewhere to put all the food they'd brought for the wake, which was supposed to be in the church hall round the back. Remus and Sirius silently waited their turn to go in. "Hello," Gethin said, barely looking up as Remus approached. "Thank you for coming." "I'm Remus," Remus said, shaking the proffered hand. Gethin looked up once, blinking. They were about eye level. "Remus." Gethin shook his head weakly, his dark eyes raking Remus over. "Hope talked about you all the time. It's a shame we're meeting like this." "Yes," Remus nodded. They stood awkwardly for a while, just looking at each other, before Gethin came to his senses. "Go on," he said, gesturing. "Your mum was keen on you sitting in the front row, but it's up to you." "Thanks," Remus nodded again. "See you after." Gethin patted his shoulder. "Yeah, good," Remus said, aware that he was speaking in single syllables. In the end, Sirius had to nudge him into the church, as he seemed to have forgotten how to move. They made their way slowly to the front, and sat down. Remus could hear people whispering about him. A few of them knew who he was, and the reaction was mixed. He ignored it. He was there for Hope and no one else. The service itself was a blur, and he barely listened. He just stared at the eagle-shaped lectern and tried to conjure up a decent memory of his mother. They didn't sing a hymn. They played a Joni Mitchell song instead. Hope had never mentioned Joni Mitchell to Remus, but he supposed it must have meant something to her. That was a painful thought. They'd had so little time. It wasn't fair. Sean was there too, of course. Remus recognised her at once. She was the only child present. She was dressed in a cream-coloured frock with a black satin sash, and kept her head buried in the lap of an old woman Remus didn't know. He assumed that was Gethin's mother, Sean's grandmother. She cried all the way through, and for some reason that was comforting to Remus. Hope must have been a wonderful mother. Afterwards, Remus's legs felt like lead. He was rooted to the spot. He didn't get up with the rest of the family to walk out. There was no coffin to follow. Her body was already at the crematorium, apparently, but waited behind for the church to clear. Sirius waited with him. When the church was all but empty, Sirius whispered, "You okay?" Remus nodded. Sirius touched his knee lightly, but no more than that. "That was really sad. It's okay if you're tired and want to go home." "No, it's fine." Remus shook his head. "I ought to go. I told Gethin I would. Just 5 more minutes?" They had to leave eventually. The caretaker wanted to tidy up. The church hall was very small and crammed full of people and people's emotions. Some of them were laughing, reminiscing. Others were still red-nosed and sombre. It was a drab little room which needed refurbishing. The wooden floorboards were splintered in places. There were notice boards dedicated to drawings by the children who'd attended Sunday school there, and another one for the local scout troop. 3 trestle tables were groaning under the weight of the food people had brought. Piles of sandwiches, meat pies, crisps, cheese and pineapple skewers, fruitcake, leftover turkey, curry, slices of ham and other cold cuts. It was a dry funeral, and an old lady in the corner was serving weak cups of milky tea. For once in his life, Remus wasn't hungry. Worst of all, there was a table covered in framed photographs and albums. Most of them were of Hope, and apart from 1 or 2 snaps of her as a little girl, not one of them had been taken before 1965. Remus looked at them all, tried to fix the image in his head. A happy, healthy woman who'd always tried to do what was best, even when other people let her down. "She'd be glad you came." Gethin appeared beside him. He reached out and stroked the glass on one of the photo frames. Hope's black and white face beamed out at him, static and lifeless. "I had to," Remus said quietly. Sirius stood at his other shoulder, ready for anything. Remus looked at Gethin. "I wish I'd been there to say goodbye." "It was very quiet, like she was," the older man said. "She was awake on Christmas morning and went to sleep right after lunch. There was no pain." Remus hadn't thought about her being in pain. He wished Gethin hadn't put it in his head. "I know what you're thinking," Gethin said, nodding at the photo display. "No pictures of you. It wasn't deliberate. She put them all in a box for me to send to you. Only I've lost track of your address." "I don't want them." Remus shook his head. "Remus," Sirius said softly, "don't make any decisions just yet." Remus just shrugged. "There are other bits," Gethin said, eyeing Sirius with some confusion, then looking at Remus again. "I'll hang on to them as long as you like." "Bits?" Remus looked at him blankly. "Things she wanted you to have," Gethin said. "Not money or anything." "I'm not interested in money," Remus said sharply. Gethin frowned. He looked hurt. His eyes were rimmed red, dark rings under them, like smudges of coal dust. Remus pursed his lips and took a step back, shaking his head. "I'm sorry, I can't be here. I'm sorry." And with that, he turned and walked straight out of the hall. It stopped raining by now, but the grass was still wet, and the scent of delicious earth was rising all round. There was a group of old men sitting on some benches outside. They'd loosened their ties and sat slouched, smoking and passing round an illicit flask of something very strong-smelling. Remus tutted, disgusted, and kept walking, wanting to get away from everything. "Remus!" Sirius came jogging up the path to catch him, Lily, James, and Peter not far behind. "I want to go," Remus said. "You can come back to Mum and Dad's if you want," James suggested. "Mum said she'll do us dinner." No. Remus shook his head. He grabbed Sirius's arm and looked at him imploringly. Please, can we just go back to the flat? Just you and me. Of course we can. Sirius put his own calm hand over Remus's desperate one, and Remus felt his heart began to steady. So that's what they did, Remus promising himself that he would apologize to the Potters and his friends another time. But if he'd been hoping for a respite from the rest of the world, to lock himself away with Sirius and pretend that just for a moment nothing else mattered, then he was in for a disappointment. There was an owl sitting on top of the mantelpiece when they got in, with a note tied to its scaly leg. Remus, my condolences. Please meet me at the Aura's office at 9 a.m. on Monday. A. Moody. I've looked at life from both sides now, from win and lose, and still somehow it's life's illusions I recall. I really don't know life at all.
Sing that very well. But, wow, the chapter that never ends. That was a long one.
That was a beast.
That was the longest.
Oh my god, it was forever.
That was an hour of straight reading.
Yes.
Woo.
What a beast.
So the biggest thing in that, I want to go back way to the beginning, where Remus gets offended. And he says he doesn't think it's right for people to keep secrets like that. Really, Remus?
I know. Oh my god.
And just being a jerk to his mother on her deathbed.
Yeah, he really was rude, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Like, oh my god. Yes, the Potters did die of dragonpox. Canonically, the Potters died of dragonpox kind of early. And yes, it is very contagious. Just had to get that out of the way.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, I just, like, and he knows, like, Sirius is just, like, oh, yeah? People shouldn't keep secrets from each other? Mm-hmm. And then...
Yeah, I agree. Who would do such a thing?
And then we get another apology. I'm so sorry I did that.
No.
Ugh.
I mean, this would have been a very nice chapter if I had cared about his mother. Her character was built up a little bit more. But
yeah, I think we were supposed to pull on. It was supposed to pull on our heartstrings, but I just I was reading this whole thing like I just don't care.
We could have avoided the funeral part at least.
That was a long funeral for a character that.
If that was how long her funeral scene is, we're gonna be here for like a 2-hour chapter when James and Lily die.
Yeah.
But see, that one, I'll actually care.
Yeah.
So it'll be like worth it.
Yeah. Because we are invested in those characters.
Exactly.
I feel like this is I feel like the whole people shouldn't keep secrets thing is supposed to demonstrate that maybe now Remus is going to change and he's going to stop keeping secrets. I don't know, but I just was reading that like, oh my god, dear Lord.
Yeah, I know.
And I know that I messed up the tempo and the pacing of Both Sides Now by Joni Mitchell. I am very sorry, guys.
Good guy Grant sending Remus a Christmas present.
I know, Remus didn't send him a Christmas present. What a D-bag.
I'm telling you, I think the whole point of this story, the thing people find sad, is Sirius.
And Dan is saying, like, why did he get so upset about the money when Giffen said there wasn't any money? Like, and Remus was like, I don't care about the money. Hey, dude.
Are you sure? Because you talked about money a lot before. It's kind of a big issue with your character.
It is kind of a big issue with his character. A little bit. A little bit.
Either way.
Dude doesn't change until Harry slaps him silly.
Yeah. It's the greatest magic Harry ever did. Change Remus.
Change Remus. Yeah, I don't know. This was just such a long chapter for a plot point that I never gave a shit about because I didn't have enough time to invest in it.
Yeah.
So
what's the next chapter called? Where are we going after this?
Probably to do more stupid werewolf shit.
Is it going to be something like Moody didn't send him on a mission because he wanted to give Remus the time to spend with his mother or something because he knew she was dying?
So the next chapter is called Auror Headquarters. Summary: Remus goes to the Ministry. Notes: content warning for sexual content towards the end of the chapter.
Now you're warning us? It's like every situation where Remus has to get Sirius to forgive him. So like every other chapter. But yeah, the Auror's office. I wonder if we're going to run into what's her name?
Oh my god, if Umbridge is in this
Umbridge.
chapter to make everything okay, if we
Right.
could get some Umbridge in here.
Just gonna run into
Like-
Umbridge at the Ministry.
If Umbridge is in this chapter, even Cornelius Fudge, I would be happy with a Cornelius Fudge cameo. I would be happy with an Umbridge cameo. Like, I would be okay with that. No, I think there have been content warnings. I just haven't been reading them because. So yeah, that's the next chapter.
Okay.
I am hoping that Fudge or Umbridge is in the chapter because it might give me something to look forward to.
That's what I'm hoping for. Fingers crossed.
Because I don't want to get back on this werewolf bandwagon.
I mean, that's where it's going.
I know,
You
but
know,
I don't
it's
want
gonna
to
be-
go there.
We have a new mission for you, Remus, if you're willing to accept.
I would instead of
You
this
knew this was coming.
But instead of this werewolf bullshit, why couldn't we have an epic duel with some Death Eaters or something? Just something different.
It'll probably happen.
Probably not.
Gonna have the epic duel with Sirius and the Death Eater, known as Peter.
Yes. But we're not going to see it because Remus isn't there, so
That's true.
we're just going to be like, Sirius did what? Oh my god. Never thought we'd want Umbridge. I want Umbridge. I love Umbridge. Are you kidding? She's awful. That's why I love her. She's so vile. She's such a great character.
Yeah, you'll love to hate her.
Yeah, she's a
Small
love to
doses.
Yeah, she's a love to hate character. She's so awful. I just wanted some Voldemort in this story. Why can't we just have some Voldemort in this story? Like, come on.
We will.
No, will we? Will we get some Voldemort in this story? I don't know.
Here's a prediction. Do they ever say how Tonks and Remus die? Just that they die at the battle, right?
Harry just sees their bodies.
How do you think they die? You think the spiders get them, the giants, Death Eaters? Or do you think like a stone falls on them?
At this point, based on how I feel about this Remus Lupin, I hope that a giant just stepped on him. I think they probably were in a duel and just got blasted.
Oh, that's not fun.
Tonks is an Auror.
Well, yeah.
So she's very skilled. I feel like The Death Eaters just got them. Bella killed Tonks. Ooh, maybe she did. I mean, maybe Bellatrix did kill Tonks. We don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Their bodies aren't described as like mutilated or anything. So.
Remus sees the spider charging, but his inability to share any secrets leads to Tonks dying. He has to think about telling her.
If the werewolf stuff was more than just whining, it would be good. But it is just whining. Maybe that's my problem. I don't know. There's a lot of complaining, and then just Remus feeling like, oh, I feel so powerful and awesome as a werewolf.
Well,
and now I feel bad about it.
Well, last time Remus didn't feel bad. It was McKinnon that felt bad.
Yeah, but Remus felt guilty about doing it and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, true. Yeah. Let's
Maddie's like, instead of Voldy, we'll get Greyback.
Yep.
I hate that. I hate Greyback. He is disgusting in the books.
Maybe you'll like him in this. Maybe we'll get to know him as a person.
He's a pedophile. We don't need to get to know him as a person.
We don't know that.
Yes, we do. It's pretty obvious in the books.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a pedophile. That's it. We don't need any more of that. Besides, how can you say, oh, yes, I would much rather have Greyback than Voldemort? It's not even close.
Touche.
Voldemort...
I bet Greyback doesn't give a monologue before he bites someone, though. You think he does? You think he's just in wolf form, like, stands over their beds or their cribs and just monologues for 30 minutes?
No. Listen, I stand firmly behind the fact that in Book 4, Voldemort talked a lot because it had literally been like 13 years since he'd been able to have a conversation or talk about anything. And he
Quirrell. What?
Real conversation. Okay. The man needed to get some things off his chest, I think.
The real reason why Voldemort was so angry and kept going after Harry was not because he stopped him from acquiring the Philosopher's Stone, because he killed him. It's because he killed Quirrell. Heartbroken.
Quirrell!
You went down a path of vengeance.
We're different as can be. More Snape would be good too. More Snape is always a plus, in my opinion. You can never have enough Snape. But that's just me.
He's supposed to be an integral part of the Marauders. They're, he's the Marauders' Voldemort, basically.
Yeah, he was their foil. He was their nemesis.
Like, each year should have been them trying to, foil Snape's plot. Make Snape analogous to Voldemort. Voldemort's Harry.
That would have been interesting, even though they bullied him. I don't know if they were necessarily on equal playing field.
But this is from the Marauders, so, write it in a way where it seems like it's justified.
Less Lupin. More Voldemort, less Lupin. That makes a good story.
More Grant.
More Grant. Let's get more Grant in this story. Voldemort and Quirrell were really close. They were like two people intertwined as one. Yeah, so apparently next time we're going to go to the Ministry.
Alright.
And hang out with Moody.
Well, we get a little break before we go and do that.
That's true. You guys won't see us for the next week. We will not be streaming this next week, but you will get some more Game of Thrones content. So.
Mm-hmm. And actually, right after this live stream ends, you'll get another audio session of all the young dudes.
Yes.
Because that video... Let me just... yes, it finished uploading. So, that's done uploading, so you get that.
We'll see if Peter comes. Suppose we will.
You never know when he's coming.
You never know when he's coming. That's right.
Well, glad we could help you vent, Maddie.
I
think you enjoy venting just as much.
I do enjoy venting just as much, and I'm just gonna leave it at this. I have never been more relieved for someone's mother to die in a story.
Jesus. That's dark. I mean, I'm not like relieved, but the thing is, I didn't have any reason to grow close to her. I'm just kind of indifferent.
Well, I just meant that now we're over this now. She was sick. Now she's dead. Now, okay.
We're whittling down the storylines we can possibly go in.
Now it's done. Move on.
Now we have Greyback. James and Lily are gonna die. Sirius is gonna die. That's about it.
Maybe Grant, hopefully, will be back sometime.
Hopefully. Grant's gonna go on, become super successful, start his own psychiatrist practice. Write some book on the struggles of children that grow up in an orphanage. Maybe Voldemort should read it.
Why wasn't Grant at the funeral? Grant's got shit to do, that's why. Grant is living his life.
Mm-hmm.
He's got shit to do. Yeah, these chapters were just they were just, blah. Yeah, we're gonna get lots of Greyback. We're probably gonna see Castor, Livia, and Gaius again.
Yeah.
Yay.
I don't even remember their names. Livia and yeah.
And no Voldemort. Probably no more Snape either.
For now.
And now apparently we know in this story that Remus thinks Lucius Malfoy is hot. So that happened.
Well, so do you, so you can't.
Yeah, that's true. Alright, fair enough. Lucius Malfoy is pretty hot. I can't judge him for that one. Yeah. The Hope chapters were just... I just didn't care. I just didn't care.
They weren't necessary.
They weren't necessary, and I was just like, okay, I can see where this is going 500 miles down the road. Let's just get there and get it over with.
But on that note...
I
think until next time.
Until next time, we will let you know when we are streaming again. In the meantime, keep an eye out for our latest Clash of Kings chapters that we will have coming out sometime this week.
All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Hope you enjoyed.